And welcome to the Blue Raider podcast. I'm your host, Jake Bolden, and welcome to a live stream of MTSU football practice here. We are at the practice facility today. We were planning for the Floyd Stadium, but I think we had a little bit of changing around of plans along with construction, so we were out at the practice facility today. Riding a little solo this morning. I've got a co-host coming, Shane Pickering. He's a partner with me over at GoMiddle.com, running a little behind this morning, but no worries. The show will go on. I appreciate everyone tuning in today. If you are listening to the live stream, and I appreciate you, one, making this a part of your morning commute this Tuesday morning. But secondly, if you are worried about missing any of the live stream, don't worry. I will have an edited, condensed version available for you this evening after we record with everybody, and throughout the day, we'll be talking with coaches. At the end of the day, we'll be having some players, and the player interviews will actually be an exclusive episode that'll premiere on Thursday on all of our streaming platforms. So once again, you're going to get your condensed form of today's live stream over on your Apple iTunes, as well as your Spotify and all that good stuff. So I appreciate you again for tuning in today. One thing that's a little bit different about Mason versus the previous staff is the morning workouts. And so we're now at 7 o'clock. We've heard the horn. We've got a few reps in. It looks like we're going to get to stretching here in a little bit. And hopefully we can give you as much up-to-date stuff as we possibly can. Obviously, we can't record the practice, but we'll be going through some of the depth chart with Shane here. Today was actually my first introduction into the depth chart, and I think it would be an interesting breakdown to see some names on there that I didn't necessarily anticipate seeing. But if you listen to last week's interview with Coach Mason after their first practice, fall camp, he says that there's a battle just about everywhere. Even at quarterback, he knows that Nick is going to be the one, but there's a battle there for the two. And up and down the lineup, you're going to see battles. And luckily for us, the Blue Raider podcast and you listeners, we're going to be able to kind of give you a little insight into that, as well as I said, interview with coaches. We'll have our coordinators on today, and then at the end of the day, we'll wrap it up with some players. So that's our little introduction as we start setting up my co-host here in just a bit. We'll step back in. on. And I do apologize. I just realized we went through that whole segment there, and we had a mic problem. So we'll backtrack there, Shane. That was our test run for us. But back to what our conversation was about Derek Mason and what his offense is doing, or what his staff is doing by implementing a whole new system of 59 new players. It could hurt a program that's already established, but now you've got a brand new staff, all new players. It's easier to actually implement a new culture with those kind of guys. And we were just discussing a little bit about the offensive line. So again, we'll run that segment back there about the offensive line. That's an area that we had a lot of question marks about because of the lack of experience. We're only returning a few games played last season. So Shane, back to you again, a little bit about the offensive line. Let's talk about where those question marks are and how you feel about it moving into the season.
I think obviously Nick Vadiato's pressured a lot last year, and you want to get that cleaned up to run the offense effectively. And they added a bunch of newcomers, whether it's junior college or high school or just college transfers. And then they kept some big names that they wanted to keep. And the talent is there, but they got to gel, like you were saying, and they got to be one unit of 5. And that's the big question mark as we enter fall camp.
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions out here at fall camp throughout all the positions. Mason last week at the opening of fall camp made the comment that there's a battle just about everywhere. Nick is going to be your one quarterback, but he said there's quite the battle there at the number 2 position. As we saw today at my first glance at the depth chart, you got Xavier Williams as your number 2. Not that necessarily means anything 1 week into fall camp. Anything can change between now and kickoff on August 31st, but it just speaks to the depth that he was able to create. And back to my original question to you as well, what were some of those areas that you think needed to be addressed this offseason?
Well, first of all, you needed to address tight end because it just was not a position under Coach Stockstill. I mean, you had the flex tight end with guys like Jeremy Tate, but you didn't have the inline tight end that you'll have with the Missouri transfer, Ryan Horstkamp, and just they transitioned offensive tackle Daniel Gonzalez to tight end. So I think you needed just to have bodies there, first of all. But then you obviously had the offensive line and the defense line. Just seeing what you have with the young talent and with the newcomers. And those are the 3 positions I'm really watching this fall camp.
Yeah, talk about the defensive line. You lose so much talent. I think when you look at it in retrospect, that line was SEC level talent. I mean, that's where most of those guys ended up going. So when you address the defensive line, how are you going to be able to create that same pressure that you were capable of? And I would still even argue that there were bright spots and there were low spots with that defensive line we had last year. We didn't have consistent pressure throughout the year, but you had guys who had a great rush presence. So that was exciting. But what do you think about this new defensive line, the look of it? I don't want to get too much in depth. Obviously, we got 2 hours to fill here, but this new look defensive line, you got Felix Hickson as a guy who's kind of exciting, young, talented SEC talent kind of guy. What do you got for the defensive line?
I think the defensive line's a solid unit. I think you would like to see someone step up and be that takeover guy. But overall, I think you got a lot of intriguing pieces. I think you got a lot of intriguing pieces there, and you got a lot of different skill sets with, like, you added, getting his last name, Aiden Marahu, the junior college guy who's more of a 3-tech, and then you have some veterans who are more traditional 4-3 defensive tackles that Stock used to run. And then you got the defensive end and the edge with Coach Josh Smith, and they've been doing everything according to the last media availability with Coach Mason. So I think you got a lot of different bodies there, and it's an intriguing room for sure.
Absolutely. Well, it's a great breakdown there, Shane. We were just informed that we're going to be under fire by field goals here in just a second. So I think now would be a good time to take a little break. Again, apologies for the early technical difficulties, but we'll keep working through them. Happy to have everyone joining us at the Blue Raider Podcast here at MTSU Fall Camp, and we will be right back in just a short break.
area that looks out over the stadium and into the field. And we'll use that on game days and during the week, like for occasional meals and that kind of thing for the athletes, and also maybe some rentable space. Then the second floor will be, it's all football. You know, our offices will be there, the meeting rooms will be there, all the auditoriums and recruiting rooms and those kind of things will all be on the second floor. And then on the first floor will be a weight room for all the student athletes named after Kevin Byard, the Kevin Byard Strength and Conditioning Room. And then a locker room for football with players lounge, barber shop, those kind of tricks in there, and a nutrition center for all of our student athletes, and a training room for all of our student athletes with the hydro pools and everything that you'd want in there. So it's going to be a fantastic building. A year from now, we'll be occupying it, and so it'll be open right now, knock on wood, scheduled to open by training camp of next year. So can't wait to cut the ribbon on that bad boy.
It's crazy how big it is. That's one thing that stood out to me. I know the steel went in the ground, but they've continued to expand upon it. They've got the Dens glass, the big green stuff that's going up there. So it is quite the eye to look at when you're coming on campus. But what's the game day festivities look like when you come here? Because things are going to change now on this end zone.
Yeah, it is. And so the visual of this during a game day is going to be fantastic. When you're out on the football field looking towards it, I mean, it's an imposing building. And so that's going to be great. This year we've done a lot to really change up our game day. We're in the Grove, which is our primary area for student tailgating. We're going to kind of flip it around a little bit and build a big stage, and working with our School of Media and Entertainment to book a lot of acts in there. And so we're going to have a concert series, Mace's Party in the Grove is what we're going to call it. So there's a lot of things going on prior to there. We want to really capture our student body. And then when they come to the stadium, you'll see a new sound system, a new scoreboard that's going in the south end zone. The thing it's up, but it hasn't been lit up yet. They haven't flipped the switch. So those will be the primary things that fans will notice will be a lot different on game day.
As far as coming to the stadium, do they need to avoid these gates or anything, or they'll still be accessible on game day?
They'll be accessible. I think gate 3, which is the gate that's closest to the baseball field and the football practice field, is the hardest gate to access. And so it'll be like it was last year. You can still get in there by walking down the path between baseball and the football practice fields. So that will work. But all the other gates will be accessible, and so we really don't want to have any kind of disruption for our fans.
And you got you're working on tailgating stuff. I know like that's going to change a little bit too, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be slowing down anybody this year.
No, and that's one of the things. We've got great tailgaters. It's a great atmosphere. We've got a great RV row, so that'll still be an impact over at the off of our Greenland Drive lot. And so that'll be good. That's important to us to maintain that. Kind of another thing that'll be a little bit different is we'll have a completed tennis stadium, our outdoor tennis facility. We cut the ribbon on it last February, so this will be the first football season we'll have with that. So we're excited about it, and how it talks to football and those kind of things. And then we've got on our drawing board renovations to the Murphy Center. And so how will the new tennis facility talk and communicate with our new student athlete performance center, and changing the way that you enter the Murphy Center, and put a grand entranceway into it. And then how does that talk to the Hall of Fame? So all these buildings we want to build and kind of connect them together so that they all talk to each other and they all have this thing in common. So when you come and you walk down that corridor, you're walking through something special.
Absolutely. And it's a beautiful spectacle. I'm excited about the Murphy Center renovations. I know that's kind of been a long time coming for a lot of fans, a lot to be excited about. But we're here today. We're talking football. So let's talk a little bit of football. I know, Mason, is something that you've been excited about for good reason. We've seen his face plastered all across Murfreesboro, which I think is great.
Yeah.
I want to know from your perspective as a guy that's been here for a while and you're changing over the hands to a new football coach, how does that culture change affect not only obviously what it's going to do for the football program and sales and revenue, but what does that do for the athletic department? He does a great job as far as energizing everybody, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, when we set out on our search, we wanted to hire a change agent. You know, we had a good program, and we're proud of it and all those accomplishments, but also kind of somebody that build the energy base to help take us to another level. And Derek's done everything that you could ask for in terms of going out and meeting people and shaking hands, and he enjoys that and draws energy off of it. And so that's been the biggest change we've had, is just that external energy that people can feel from the Murphy Center. I think internally that he's really put his stamp on it as well with our staff, you know, and looking at a fresh pair of eyes, and maybe there's another way to do things and those kind of things. So I think that's been really good. The staff that he's brought in, the assistant coaches, are all really accomplished men, and so we've got a lot of confidence in the football piece. And so the other thing that's happened is the and I don't want to make it sound like, Jake, that the administration wasn't behind football before, because it really was. But this kind of doubling down what we've seen with Derek and how he's been able to ignite our deans, our chairs, throughout academia on campus, because they've seen him and they feel like he's a part of us, you know, and so they want to support that. And so that's been a huge change for us. So he's done everything right, everything that you'd want in terms of going out and building the external piece of it, which was so important to us. So I'm just excited. I hope all the results translate out into the football field. We've got 50 some newcomers. So how does all that get integrated and all of those kind of things against a really tough September schedules? But I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, could be a rocky start, but I think, again, it just kind of builds character. And to bounce off what you're talking about there with Mason, and I met him last week at the family fun night that they had, and what a guy. I mean, he's willing to pull aside, talk to everybody he possibly can, and you got to love that. But one thing I really want to take away, just to carry over about his character, was the first day of fall camp. It was asked, you know, what does it feel like to be back out? And he got a little emotional on us. And I think that speaks volumes to the type of guy that he is, because this clearly still means something to him. Obviously, this isn't some sort of halfway. That's just the kind of guy he is. And I think that, again, that's a reason to be excited as Blue Raider fans.
Yeah. And not everybody's had the privilege to meet him yet. But when you do, you realize in the first 10 seconds that this guy is not a halfway in kind of guy. He's a total commitment. And it is something for him to have this opportunity. And we've talked about that several times. He's excited to be in a league where he fights an equal fight, you know, and didn't really feel like maybe he had those kind of opportunities at Vanderbilt, where everything is a tough fight and you're fighting resources. Here, all of our resources are pretty much the same, with the exception of Liberty. I mean, they've got a ton of resources, but they're also pretty limited in their scope of what they can do as a school. So we feel like, you know what, that we can go into Conference USA and we can win this thing. And let's shoot for the championships. And he's excited and that's the re-energizing for him, is to actually be a part of a program that can win the league championship.
I think the pieces are there, absolutely, and the biggest thing for a lot of people is just the question marks. How does it all gel together? Like you said, you got nearly the 60 pieces of new players on roster, an entirely brand new staff. How does all that gel together? But Chris, I appreciate your time. Before we hang up here, I want to know your input on this upcoming this academic calendar year for all athletics, not just football. Your outlook this year. There's a lot to be excited about. Basketball had a great offseason. We know what women's basketball is bringing to the table. Baseball is kind of getting that second year under the new coach, and then as well as softball, hoping to have a bounce back. Just collectively, you know, what's your outlook this year for the athletic department?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think you mentioned the two programs that just kind of, as you were forming the question, leaped to my mind was men's basketball had a phenomenal offseason, and just watching them practice, you can see the talent levels increased. Cam Weston's about 80% back. He's supposed to get full go, I think, in late October, maybe mid-October. So they'll get him back, and so he's a really important part of our program, and so that fact alone but what Nick's been able to do is add a bunch of newcomers to it. So men's basketball is looking a whole lot different than it did a year ago, and then women's basketball just keeps reloading. I mean, the job that Rick Insel and his staff's done, I would hope that we can have another deep NCAA run and those kind of things. Man, they're kicking
under
field
fire.
goals.
Yeah, we're under fire.
Yeah,
here.
that Zeke Rankin almost hit us there. So we'll have that with women's basketball. Our track is going to be strong again. Last year we won both cross countries. So expect to have a repeat there, and then obviously you can't talk about us too much without talking about men's tennis and Jimmy Borndane and the job he's done. So our spring sports will be solid. The football we're looking to improve. Men's and women's basketball will be great.
Absolutely, a lot to be excited about. A lot of those mainstay programs, like you mentioned, the men's tennis, women's basketball. So again, excited about that. I think I might keep you around. It looks like we get a little extra security with you here when the field goals are coming.
Yeah.
But Chris, I appreciate your time. Appreciate you having us here.
And these guys look like they can catch a little bit. That was what I was worried when they first lined up. Can they really protect us? But I think they're doing a good job.
Doing good so far. Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming on and joining us.
All right. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate what you do.
All right, welcome back to the Blue Raider podcast. I am now joined by special teams coordinator Luke Pascal. Luke, how's it going?
Great. Lost my voice. I apologize, but everything's going good right now.
This early, coach, you're already losing your voice?
Probably shouldn't, but there's a lot of things that need to be corrected right now. So give it to them loud right now.
Well, Coach, one thing about your position that's a little bit different compared to most G5s is the fact that you are a special teams coordinator. That's kind of most programs kind of piece that position together through help throughout the staff, but that's kind of something that you specialize in. You are renowned as one of the best in the country in regards to special teams. I want to know, what's your approach to that position?
Being detail oriented, making sure everybody around, not only players, coaches, everybody has a sense of urgency to get the job done. There's really no secret to it. And the secret is there is no secrets. I mean, it's consistency. It's, like I said, a high sense of urgency, effort, attitude, toughness. Those type of things are the things that translate onto the field. And as long as you can be consistent in how you approach it every single day, both on and off the field, in a meeting room, in a walkthrough, everything everything's cranked up all the time. And if they feel that from you, usually people respond the right way.
And it's kind of that third facet of the game that can always get ignored and win and lose games that way. I always draw back in MTSU's history about the Conference USA Championship game a few years ago. You lose on a penalty, but you also stay in the game because of the field goal kicking. It's just one of those games. It's the part of the game that always gets forgotten, but will surely come up and bite your butt. And I'm sure that's something that you always preach to your players as well as your staff that's helping you out there.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is like every game's going to start with a special teams play. Yeah, I mean, there's so many hidden things, so many momentum plays that occur in a game when it comes to special teams. And if it's just another phase for you as a program, and you go against somebody that it means a lot to, you can see real quick what it can do. It can demoralize you if you're getting bowled over the entire game, if you're getting beaten situational football on special teams, blocks. Yeah, I mean, you have anywhere from an 87% to a 90% chance of winning that game if you just block a kick, block a punt anyway. But those are the types of things that we want to make sure the guys understand that we go by saying here, one plan out, and they don't get another opportunity. You got to make it happen right then and there, and making them understand that every rep counts. We're not a big, we're not getting a bunch of quantity. We don't. That's part of the teaching of what we do. Is it's the quality of the rep. How intense is that one rep? Because that's what you're going to have to do in a game. You don't get a do-over unless there's a penalty or something that occurs, which usually doesn't occur. You're not getting another chance to do that rep. So we've got to be cranked up for that rep.
And one thing Mason spoke about last week at the opening of fall camp was the amount of battles. And that's even comes to the special team side of things, because you're too deep. There's always going to take part in your special teams. Are you kind of experiencing those kind of things too, is where you're talking about it's you one rep, it counts, it matters. Are you kind of experiencing those things through fall camp where you got to find guys that or have that fine-tuned attention to detail as well as making that rep count?
Yeah, I mean, we're always going to be competing. The guys that we trust that are going to do it right when we turn our backs, that they're going to do it exactly the way it's asked to be done, the standard that has been set, that they're going to hold themselves personal accountability to getting that rep done the way we want it and the way we see fit. So inside of that, if we've got guys that are inconsistent and getting the job done, there's going to be movement at all times. And it doesn't matter if you're a freshman, senior. This is not a factory. The oldest guys don't get the best jobs. So that's what we're going to instill every single day. And hopefully the cream rises to the top.
Contrary to most of the staff, you're a familiar face here in Murfreesboro. You're well traveled. You've been around a little bit on the coaching circuit, but you're back here in Murfreesboro. How does it feel, one, to be back, and two, are things back to normal for you? The city's changed quite a bit.
The city has changed, especially over there on the where medical center is. That wasn't there when I was. I think Red Robin and Bonefish was the only thing there when I left, and I haven't been back since 2007 to the city of Murfreesboro since I got back in January. But it's been unbelievable, a little nostalgic, but it's been really good. My family's here, everybody's settled in, and it's great to be back. This is home. Like I said, it would have taken a lot for me to leave the University of Louisiana. My family loved it down there, loved working down there. Everything about that place was awesome. But when home comes calling, you can't pass that up. And Coach Mason gave me an opportunity to come back.
So that's how that conversation went. It was more of a Mason reaching out to you, bringing you here to Murfreesboro, and you were sold on it, or how did that work?
I've been trying to get back for a long time. Circumstances were different, and I never got the opportunity. But I've been trying to get back for a long time. This is a place that made me, shaped me who I am, and foundationally. So I've been trying to get back for a long time. But it's a funny story that I have no ties to Coach Mason. I've never worked with him, know of him, but I had no ties to him whatsoever. And usually in this profession, that's not how it goes. Like, yeah, you got to have some type of a connection. I got his number in mid-December last year after our bowl game, and I just cold called him and cold texted him. Okay. So he ended up responding, and I got an interview at the National Coaches Convention, and I guess I did a good job, and he offered me on the spot.
That's an insane story, but that kind of speaks to the character of this team, really. Like what's the saying? You're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and you're definitely a testament to that. That's an interesting story.
Shout out Michael Scott, Wayne Gretzky.
That's right. Well, Coach Pascal, I appreciate your time. I know you got a few other interviews to get through, and you're a busy man, but I appreciate you taking the time out of fall camp to come talk to us today.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful.
Thanks. All right, welcome back into the Blue Raider podcast as we are live at MTSU Fall Camp. Joining me again is Shane Pickering, filling in some time for us. Shane, you had the opportunity to take a peek at some practice there. I want to get into some position breakdowns here as we're getting near the halfway point of practice. We saw some reps there with the ones and twos. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing out there.
Omari Kelly's as good as advertised. That's the first thing I noticed. No matter who they put on him, whether it was inside or outside, first team, second team, the ball was going to him and he was getting it. Past that, the receivers look as good as advertised. It's very deep room. And Xavier Williams, the Charlotte UCF transfer, running second team, so that was noteworthy.
My man Mark's bringing us breakfast. Here we go. Appreciate it.
You got your wish of the breakfast bar.
But yeah, you're talking about the offense. The receiving room looked good there. I'm no shock on Amari Kelly in my opinion. I think he's very underrated just because the numbers at Auburn weren't there. But it's easy to get overshadowed at a school like that. But I think that there's reason to be excited for Amari Kelly. I think he's a guy that by the end of the year we could be praising his name as a first team All CUSA. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on some sort of pro board by the end of his career. I mean, he's a heck of an athlete, and it shows. Another guy, Gamarion Carter, who's just a freak athlete. I don't know that he necessarily has the catch in traffic to give you the NCAA football terms, but he's another exciting guy. But the offensive line is an area that we've been looking to see what we got there and what were you able to see when those ones and twos rolled out.
It was mainly quick passing, so it wasn't too much with the offensive line. But they're definitely bigger than last year. That was the first takeaway immediately when seeing them in person. And so whether that physicality needs to translate to the field during the season, but it's going to be a lot bigger and should be a lot more physical considering their slogan this year is physical, tough, and intelligent. So that's the main thing about the offensive line I've noticed so far.
And not a lot of returning production there, as we prefaced in the beginning. I know we had some technical difficulties, so I'm not sure how much the fans were able to catch of that part. But there's just the only name that comes to mind is Mateo. He's probably going to return back at right guard for him. But past that, it's going to be a whole bunch of new faces. And I know from what we're seeing today versus what we saw or what I saw at the first day of fall camp, we're already seeing new guys worked in there. I know Marcus Miller, the transfer from UNLV, got a lot of reps. So he's another guy that I think is going to stand out as far as guys that are kind of solidifying themselves slowly on that one spot. But it seems like everywhere else is kind of open in the tackle positions, especially. What I mean, the battle there. Are there names that you kind of like to see in that tackle spot?
I'm interested with Marcus Miller. Speaking of him, if he moves back out to tackle when Ethan Ellis gets back and in the mix. He's at practice today, but when he starts running with the ones again. But I mean, Jason Bodeford started a game last year. Shamar Crawford listed as a tackle. He's coming out of big time junior college and Independence, had a big year last year. So there's definitely talent there and some experience, whether it might not be on the field on Saturdays, but there's experience there to use and versatility up front that could allow for more depth, I think, than people give them credit for. But it's the starting five that you just got to see it on Saturdays.
And the gel. I know I've used that word a whole bunch today, but there's so much that goes into an offensive line and their ability to gel together, being able to communicate without actually saying words. It's all a feel when it comes to those offensive linemen. And so with them, it's how they work together. And back to our comment earlier, I think the fact that they're all relatively new with one another may be a great way to kind of build that relationship, especially through fall camp. And a lot of them were already here. They were present during spring camp. So they've already built up a few months of continuity together. So you hope, again, and one thing I loved about Marcus Miller and his media availability after day one of fall camp was that iron sharpens iron, and that's kind of and competition breeds excellence, and that's kind of some things that I know he's a part of the Derek Mason now, so you're going to hear a lot of mantras, a lot of mottos like that, but I think that's something that shouldn't be taken for granted when it comes to these guys because they seem to understand what's at stake for them, and that's a good strong group. At the top, we were talking a little bit too about the tight end position. It was almost obsolete. You had Holden Willis, who's listed as a tight end, but if we're all being honest with ourselves, he's more of a flex slot guy. He's still going to be featured on this offense technically as a tight end, but I know with Bodie Reeder, we might see some 12, we might see some 13 or even 23 personnel. So we're going to see a lot of the tight ends past Holden Willis. You know, what are the names that are popping? I know TK was one that stood out at the spring game, but past him, what are some names standing out at tight end?
The Missouri transfer is one that's interesting to me just because he started games in the SEC, and he's got that more traditional tight end vibe compared to Holden Willis or TK or Jacob Coleman, who was getting some reps earlier today. But I think you're going to have to find guys that can block. And whether that's Jacob Coleman or TK Suttereth, because like you said, Holden Willis is just a big slot. And whether that's freshman Brody Binky, who's the biggest guy in the room already, you could see him maybe getting some 12 personnel looks where they run 2 tight ends. And they've said they're going to run multiple tight ends with this offensive line. So that's going to be the thing to watch, is who can block. And I think that's who gets out there the most.
And that is true. Like when you're talking about what the offense that Bodie Reader wants to run, they're obviously going to put Willis out there at the flex or the slot, but having a guy that can be a two-way player for you. And when we're talking about Conference USA as a whole, to kind of tease and tell everyone about what I've got going on outside of the Blue Raider podcast with the Conference USA Roundtable, we're doing our all-conference team voting, and right now, head over heels, the tight end vote is Sean Brown at Jacksonville State. And I know if you're a G5 guy, that name might not even pop out to you, because I don't think the guy even had over 200 yards of receiving last year. But the reason that he stands out and the reason that he is out on some pro boards is because of his ability to be a two-way player. And that's vital when you're trying to implement the run game, having that extra blocker as well as having a threat, because Sean Brown is a guy that is a threat both ways. Jacksonville State has a good run game. The pass game is to be determined, as we'll see this year. Still a little bit of a quarterback question for him, but having a two-way tight end is going to be paramount to the success of the run game. And I think Horsecamp, is, like you said, fits that piece. Binky's a little young, maybe probably going to redshirt as deep as that tight end room is. But who's to say? Like I said, if he shows up in camp and he's doing a two-way job, I'm sure Mason's not going to be scared to throw him in. And the way the NCAA works now, you get 4 games. Yeah. And then you got the red shirt. So you might even see in the Tennessee Tech game, I wouldn't be shocked if maybe they throw him in. You're looking at Western Kentucky after the Ole Miss game. God, you hope you make it out healthy out of the Ole Miss. But anyways, back to the breakdown of the offense. We've talked about wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, offensive line. The only thing left is the running back room. And that's something that Mason, after first day of media availability, said that is the deepest room he's ever seen in all of his years of coaching. That's at Vanderbilt, Auburn, Oklahoma State. He said he's never seen a deeper running back room. And it comes at the top. You've got 2 of the more experienced guys in Flip Krettel and Frank Peasant. You've got to be excited about those guys, and as well as the depth pieces behind them. I love Jace Gardner in the spring game. Who knows who's going to throw out there as the RB3 this year, but the running back room is deep.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what it looked like at Vanderbilt, but this rushing attack should definitely be one of the top in the conference. And I mean, you look at the Thunder and Lightning combo of Frank Peasant and Flip Krettel, that's going to be up there. And then even with a bigger back like Jace Gardner or a dynamic returner that they brought in from UConn with Brian Bruton, that room is deep and it gives you so many different looks. And they could honestly run out some 2 running back packages this year. And even with Bruton, you could put him in the slot. So finding ways to get those guys on the field, and it's just going to add to an already loaded offense. If the offensive line can create holes for those running backs, this offense is going to be scary for other Conference USA defenses.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up Bruton. He's kind of a forgotten guy in this running back room as a whole. When you talk about Bruton, his ability to be a dynamic player, when you talk about Phil Still's preseason, he has Bruton as I believe the 4th team All-CUSA on the kick returning side. So that's kind of exciting stuff in regards to that, because MTSU hasn't really had that guy in years when it comes to the kick return game. The only guy that comes to mind, Richie James. That's the only real kick returning threat we've ever had in years past. So maybe he adds that duality of being a special teams guy along with being a good running back. But the running back room is deep. Those guys, I expect a lot of reps between Frank and Frank Peasant and Flip Krettel. For those that they're very similar body types, but with Frank, he's going to be your third down back, short yardage kind of guy, and then Flip is he's going to be kind of your longer range. He does have that dynamic ability to catch out of the backfield, but I maybe you would agree with me. I don't consider that their mainstay. They're both downhill runners.
Yeah, I agree. I think Peasant's more between the tackles, and Krettel is more on the outside run. But yeah, they both want to get downhill, one cut, and make something happen.
Absolutely. Well, that's your offensive position breakdown there. I wish I had a starting lineup for you. We've got a depth chart here for my eyes, it's changed from the first time I envisioned it. I know that we've talked about it off air before about what the depth chart would look like. So for those that are listening and hoping we can break some news for you, I don't have it for you today. I don't think Mason will have it for us either today. And that sometimes is a good thing. So we will take another short little break, and we will be back with you again shortly. Welcome back to the Blue Raider podcast as we are live at fall camp. A lot of the action, they finally ran away from us. We had wide receivers around us. We had the quarterbacks throwing the deep balls right here in front of us, but actions moved away, and I think now's a good opportunity again to continue our position breakdown. as we move through fall camp today. Defense is an area that saw the transfer portal absolutely demolish a lot of the healthy pieces that we have. Joining me here is Shane Pickering, partner with me over at GoMiddle.com. Shane, tell me about what the additions that Mason made on that defensive side that could give us a glimmer of hope that we may see some glory there again.
I mean, I'm looking at this depth chart, and it's littered with new talent, whether it's from junior college. They have Abdul Muhammad, a junior college corner that came in the starting lineup. They have John House, the transfer from Vanderbilt safety, starting. And then you have guys just in the front seven. And so I think it definitely adds more depth and more talent to the roster. And I think the defense really is the strength of the team. I know we talk about the receivers and the running back creating an explosive offense. But if the front seven can stay healthy, this defense will be one of the top in the conference for sure.
Yeah, and it all starts up front. The defensive line really is what got absolutely demolished. Talk about that SEC talent again. I don't know what everyone heard as far as the sound goes, but the defensive line was shredded, and it's a great a line in regards to the Conference USA level. You would love to have seen what you could have done with another year of eligibility with all those guys, but life moves on, and Mason doesn't seem to be too upset about what he's got returning there. I know one guy that I highlighted was Felix Hickson there at the defensive tackle position. I don't know if he's going to play nose for him or not. He's definitely a big body, but one thing that I think stands out is the size may not necessarily be there like we see on the offensive line, but I do think the physicality is there, as you mentioned. That's something that we needed to replace, and these guys kind of provide that for him. The room's not very deep, but the pieces are there, and like we keep talking about, it's all about how they work together and what they're going to be able to do with new defensive coordinator Brian Stewart.
Yeah, and the edge rushers are going to be completely different than what Coach Stockstill and the last staff had, whereas more traditional four-man front, bigger ends like Zaylen Wood, Q Duncan, and Richard Kinley. And this, you're going to have that more stand-up edge that guys like even Brandon Buckner, who's a bigger defensive end, has been working on standing up, dropping back in coverage at 250 pounds. But you bring in Andy Woko, you bring in two freshmen that are explosive pass rushers. You have James Stewart, who had 3 sacks in the spring game. So, yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting to complement. While the guys inside might not be as big, can they generate holes and open up pass rushing lanes for the new look edge rushers?
Nwoko was a guy that surprised a lot of us when preseason stuff came out. He really wasn't on either one of our radars regards to starting. He's the transfer from Stony Brook, obviously going to be a new name for Blue Raider fans, but evidently he's a guy that we need to be paying attention to. Him and James Stewart, like you said, James Stewart had an excellent spring game, but Nwoko wasn't there for that. So it's interesting what he's going to be able to provide as far as the duality of the edge rushers. I think there's a lot of promise there, but to piggyback off what you're saying there about opening those rushing lanes, the linebacker position, it's probably the most experienced group we have besides quarterback, which is a solo position, but all across the board, all 4 spots there, they're pretty deep when it comes to the experience there. But you got Parker Hughes, who's going to be a unanimous CUSA first teamer, in my opinion. I think Devin Curtis is another guy who's in that conversation. I don't know how Brian Stewart plans to utilize his outside linebackers in regards to the pass rush. But I would imagine he's going to be utilizing those. So I say that because those numbers are going to be there for Devin Curtis. That was going to put him in that discussion for all CUSA first team. So you got those 2 guys. And you got a lot of more depth there. But those 2 specifically, Parker Hughes and Devin Curtis, are guys I'm really excited about the leadership that they're going to bring to this team as well as the experience.
Yeah, and you have Drew Francis too as the third linebacker, who I think can play either linebacker spot. You saw him come in against Missouri and was a force. And they're very veteran led, with Curtis as a senior, Drew Francis is a senior, Jalen Davis is a senior. So can they create some younger depth? That's kind of what I'm going to be looking for in fall camp. Can they create younger depth for next year, or do they have to get 2 more transfers to start next year? Or I guess Parker can come back, so another backup linebacker. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for. But in terms of the veterans, the linebacker core is very, very good.
To lean on your specialty here, is that kind of an area, because we talk about the top end talent at linebacker, is that an area that they've been addressing pretty well, in your opinion, in regards to recruiting high school or JUCO or otherwise?
Well, at the latter part of the offseason, they added junior college linebacker Nolan Forsha, who he's got some size. He could probably play a little bit right away. They only brought in one one high school linebacker in Amarian Bailey, and he has a lot of upside. They only have one linebacker commit, so in 25, so you would like to see them add maybe another guy. But AJ Rizik, the linebacker coach, is one of the more relentless recruiters on the staff, and if he can carry that over to coaching like he has in his career, I think he'll be able to develop the position. But you would like to see them add maybe a couple more commits.
Yeah, shout out to Coach Reesig. We talked off air before we came back on about my time at Eagleville, and he actually made the trip out to my little old school out there in Southwest Rutherford County. So, but a very active recruiter in that linebacker group. What's to come in the future, and you hope you can bring back Hughes for another year. And I think he feels comfortable about where he is. He didn't leave like the rest. Like I think a lot of us thought him and Devin Curtis both would, but we're excited to have him back. But talk about the transfer portal. I think one area that the transfer portal helped on the defensive side is the secondary. We're going to bring in Brendan Harris, a guy that has lots of Division I experience at his time at Wake Forest. I always get him confused. You got Brendan Harris, who's from Wake Forest, and you've got the kid from Purdue. I'm blanking on his name.
Ricky Smith.
So he's the cornerback, or he's actually the strong safety from Purdue, right? Yeah. So you got those two guys who have Division I experience, and then you are returning a lot of experience homegrown here with Diari McDonald, the Oakland product. And then you got Tyrell Raby, who is a Memphis transfer from a couple years ago, but he saw some playing time last year. They look like a lot of experience. Again, it's a matter of Diari making that transfer from outside linebacker, kind of a flex nickelback, now playing a true corner as we've seen today. He's not listed on the depth chart if you go looking for him, but he's out here getting the reps with the one. I think he's a special talent. Again, Oakland product for those here in Murfreesboro. And then to piggyback again back on our safeties with Ricky Smith, who I'm not sure where Ricky falls on the depth chart, but Brendan Harris is going to be your number one.
Yeah, and they added John House, the fourth, I think, from Vanderbilt, and he was that third safety in the rotation at Vanderbilt, so he was legit playing in the SEC, and he's on the starting line for the depth chart this season, at least from the depth chart we have right now. And he made a lot of plays at Vanderbilt, so that could be a guy to watch. But yeah, the safeties are really deep. The cornerbacks, you have a lot of experience, but past 2 or 3 guys, you don't have a lot of Saturday experience, so that could be something to look for. But they're long and athletic, and you have that shutdown guy in Tyrell Raby on one side, which makes it easier for the other side.
Yeah, the cornerback position's always been an area, in my opinion, that's been relatively weak. I've never really loved our pass game, and that might have been a product of the pass rush. But in my opinion, we've always had a relatively good front seven. So I've never given much of a pass to the secondary. But it's going to be for the most part a new look. Like I said, Diari's kind of making a full-time shift to the secondary. So we'll see what he has. Another guy that I like a lot is James Mons. He's a young guy transfer in from Indiana. Didn't have much of playing experience there, but he's listed, I believe, at the nickelback, or at least most places he's listed at the nickelback. So we'll see where he fits into the defense this year. I'm sure he'll get reps at cornerback at some point in time. But again, just adding to the depth as well as the P4 level talent that we were able to garner outside.
It definitely feels weird to still hear P4 instead of P5. But no, James Mons has a ton of upside, and the nickel, and it's him and Trevon Farrell, who didn't really play much last year. So I think that's still an open competition. I would have thought Diari McDonald would have been there personally, but they've kind of, like you said, transitioned him to outside corner. So James Mons kind of has that open spot to if he can work himself into that role. And he's got a lot of eligibility left. He was just redshirt freshman last year, I think. So there's a lot to work with there, and he's already very talented. So that could be a player that as the season progresses that fans really get excited about, in my opinion.
And as we eventually will have an opportunity to talk with defensive coordinator Brian Stewart about what his plans are with the secondary. But one thing that is for sure is that a lot of those guys are movable. I don't think that, and I keep falling back on this, and if you're listening for the whole time, I'm sorry for the amount of times I've had to repeat this, but there's so many battles, and I don't think that anything's a mainstay at the moment. So I think that you're looking at fall camp, potentially in that first matchup with Tennessee Tech. You might even roll through some bodies there at Ole Miss just to see what you got when you're going up against that level of talent, because that's important, because you're going against some pass-heavy teams in the conference. Liberty, when you look at what they offered last year, they had a lot to offer in the run game. They didn't have to pass a lot, but you got the best quarterback in Conference USA in Caden Salter, who has the weapons, although Liberty's going to have to replace a few of those pieces at the outside wide receiver positions. But it's vital to the success, in my opinion, of this season that the secondary play is good. And I want to ask you that question in regards to defense, maybe not necessarily the secondary, but when it talk about defense, when we want this season to go successful for the Blue Raiders, what has to happen for this team to be good on defense and be successful when it comes to Conference USA play?
Yeah, I think a lot last year, the front seven masked a lot of weaker links in the secondary. And then you had some guys get hurt earlier in the year too. That front seven's not here anymore, at least on the defensive line. So that whole unit as a whole is going to have to step up and play as a collective unit. And you got to stay healthy up front. You have the depth, and even at cornerback, you have the depth at safety, even linebacker in that edge position. But at the defensive tackle and the cornerback spot, you have to stay healthy there until you find some reliable depth that you can trust to throw out there with everyone healthy. Now, everyone's not going to stay healthy, but you have to have guys out there that you trust and that have played some Division I football. And there's not as many at spots like cornerback or defensive tackle. So those guys have to stay healthy, and they just have to play as a collective unit. They don't have those takeover guys that you saw like you had with a Marley Cook or a Zaylen Wood. So they're just going to have to play as one big unit.
Or at least we hope. The question marks, we haven't seen these guys in live action. Nwoko is a guy that evidently, again, he's getting high praise amongst coaches throughout the conference as a guy that could be a threat. To be fair, I didn't see a lot of film from him at Stony Brook. The numbers look good, but you're facing FCS competition relative to what you're going to be facing here in Conference USA. So he's a guy I'm keeping an eye on, as well as James Stewart. I expect big numbers from him on the pass rush, but I couldn't agree more. I think the pass rush is an area that we have to see is good in order for this defense to perform really well. But we'll transition now. We're eventually going to be talking about Conference USA and the outlook here, and we're going to have a guest here to speak with us on that, and we will be back shortly. Welcome back into the Blue Raider podcast. I am now joined. We had a little slight change in schedule here, but I've got offensive coordinator Coach Bodie Reeder. Coach Reeder, how you doing?
Doing well. It's right in the middle of practice, so it's neat. It's kind of I'm watching my guys do Indy right now and seeing how they're doing, and getting a chance to visit with you.
Well, your voice is a lot better than Coach Pascal, so hopefully, if you need to make any in game or in practice adjustments, you're more than welcome to do so. But Coach Reeder, a lot to go over in just a short amount of time. But one thing. The breakdown on you that I think is so interesting is when you talk about Brian Stewart, his experience, and Mason, his experience. You're kind of still relatively in the game of coaching a new face, but you've worked with a lot of really good quarterbacks. And I was fortunate to kind of look through some of the names. And Blue Raider fans, if you're a football fan, you'll know some of them, like Mason Rudolph. You'll talk about Mason Fine, a guy who was great, excellent at North Texas. Again, that might got overshadowed because of his G5 experience, but talk to me about what brought you to MTSU and working with some of those guys and how you're taking that experience here at MTSU.
Yeah, my background's a little bit different. You know, Coach Stewart and Coach Mason, obviously with experience in the NFL, and I'm completely different. You know, I started off as Division III coach, and I've kind of worked my way in different path to get to this spot. But the players have made the big difference, and it didn't matter if I was coaching a Division III game or I was also lucky enough to coach in the Sugar Bowl. The butterflies were the same because of how special the game is. And I think the quarterback position is special, and the bond that you can have with those guys. And, it's kind of, we have to live in the same circle as the play caller and the quarterback, because everybody thinks they can call plays and everybody thinks they can play quarterback, right? So we got to be ready to distribute the credit and absorb all the blame. And that's what has made my quarterback special. They've been low ego, high leadership, qualities. So I've been really, really lucky to be around some good ones.
And you're pretty fortunate too about Nick. I think one that we all didn't think would stick around, but he is, and I think that's a lot to be excited about from an offensive coordinator perspective. What are you learning about Nick and his game, and what he brings to the table for the offense this year?
Well, Nick is the one thing I'll say about him is he's cool as a cucumber. You can't rattle him. He's the same. Whether he had a bad play or had a good play, he's the same in the meeting room as he is on the field, and that is probably due to his experience and what he's been through. But his demeanor and what he does is on the field is pretty special. Now, I'm just looking for him to take the next steps in regards to, all right, you've mastered your position, right? It masters the wrong word to say, but you've learned your position within the offense, right? But now coach the other 10 guys and get them in the right spot that you need them to be in. So it's kind of like that on the field coach, during the play, and he's getting better.
One thing that's different this year is the new in-game headset that the quarterback can wear. How are you adjusting to that? How is Nick adjusting to that? And what kind of challenges, if any, does that bring for you guys?
I love it. I don't know how much he likes it, because I'm obviously talking to him, but how we've kind of approached it in our room is we're going to operate as normal. Okay. So we're still going to signal. We're still going to, do those things. But what I am to him is I'm there to remind him of tips and reminders throughout the course of the play and what we're looking for and how we want to operate. But I don't want it to be anything that's a distraction. So we're going to operate as normal, but it is a change. So, but I think our guys have been pretty good.
One thing that's kind of gone throughout fall camp is you talk about all these new guys. Mason's made it kind of a point of how the culture has changed with 60 new guys. You're a part of that new change as well. Are you finding it easy to kind of implement the culture that you're creating within the offense with that many new players?
Yeah, I think we had a really good summer, and those new guys that, they were either here in the spring or arrived in June, and they had a good couple months of training and learning the offense. So this fall camp, it hasn't felt necessarily like 60 new guys, because I feel like they took care of their business in the summertime and they got them in a position that fall camp could be productive from practice one.
Let's talk a little bit about the wide receivers. Amari Kelly's a guy that I had pinpointed from day one. He's going to be special. I want to hear your take on Kelly and what he brings to this offense.
Yeah, so Amari has got to be consistent on all three downs. So he has to, and what I mean by that is he can't just be a guy that's going to show up on third down and go make a catch, right, to get it first, which is very important, right? But we're going to ask him on first down to be involved in the run game. We're going to be ask him to be involved in the RPO game. He has to be that linchpin and that cog in the offense that can kind of do and be involved in all facets of the game, because he's so smart.
I think that's our period bell there, Coach. So I know you got to get back to it. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
All right, thank you. Is that okay?
All right, welcome back into the Blue Raider podcast as we are live from MTSU Fall Camp. We are working midway through our second hour here, and I am pleasantly joined by a friend of the show. I think you're probably the longest tenured guest I've had on the show, but no stranger to BRP faithful. I got Sam Doughton with us. Sam, how's it going, man?
Excited to be here, Jay. Excited to welcome you all and the rest of our media group out here for our second annual media day. Really successful last year, and glad that y'all started up and get to be a part of it this year. I think it's a really great opportunity. You got a chance to talk to Coach Reeder and Coach Pascal already this morning, and got to see a little bit of the team as well. So get to see what I get to see every day. So really exciting.
Yeah, just a little tidbit into Sam's world as far as being at practice. It's an early morning, and I know in your CUSA Insider, you talked about how you're kind of happy about that. It seems to, I mean, I know it's early, but in reference to the heat, as you get down here in the Southeast, you got to feel a lot better about it. But tell me a little bit about the changes you're kind of experiencing this year as you move to a new football coach.
Well, the biggest benefit for me is I don't have to be out here stretching at 6:30 like the players do. I can sort of, show up at 7 or 7:30 and get most of what I need, in a given day, or even show up at 8:30 if I got something going on in the morning, and still get to see sort of the practice reps, the scrimmage reps, sort of at the end of the day. But it's really different. That Coach Mason, I think, structures his practice a little differently, sort of going period to period. One thing we were talking about before we got on air was sort of the longer stretching period, how they do a little bit more active movement stretches, some more high knees stuff, as a team, which I think has been positive. It's clearly, kept guys active and, kept most of them, knock on wood, out of sort of the recovery area over on the side with Coach Blatnick so far. So some good things going on. Obviously, a long way to go in camp. A lot of position battles still to sort out. I see y'all got the depth chart here. Smart thing to flip to that page right away when you get the media guy, but I suspect that'll change quite a bit, as we get closer to camp, as some guys get healthy, closer to, kickoff against Tennessee Tech, I should say. So I'm just trying to figure out how things are working, what the offense is going to look like, what the defense is going to look like. Got a little bit better idea now than I had at the start of camp. I had at CUSA kickoff a couple weeks ago in Frisco, and that's really all you can ask for at this point.
Only things I've been able to piece together, and as helpful as a depth chart is, as we've learned, it's tentative. Every day it seems to be tentative. But the only things are certain in this world is death, taxes, and Nick Vattiato is going to be QB1.
Mm-hmm.
You got Omari Kelly as the wide receiver 1. You feel good about your running backs. The offensive line has been an area that's been a question mark, and I know I've discussed it ad nauseum here on the live stream today. For me, I look at it. I look at the roster. I know the experience, the snaps aren't there, but from a physicality and a physical presence, that they got better. And one thing that I do want to point out is Mateo. He's one of the few returning guys that started all of last season. He was kind of already in a battle. And when you piece by transitive property there, if he was a starter, he was an all-freshman selection last year, and now he's battling for a spot. By transitive property, the line got better. At least that's how I look at it.
Well, the one thing I've sort of been saying about the offensive line is that in years past, you didn't have to look at the numbers to know when the first team offensive line was in practice. You could sort of just tell from a distance, either by execution or particularly by size, that the first team was in for this rep. And you didn't have to check to see if Nick was in at quarterback or what have you. You could just sort of know. And that's not really true this year. The difference between the first and second team is a lot smaller than it's ever been. And that's good because that means that there's competition, all over the place. You think Julius Pierce probably's got a little inside edge at center just because the stability he provides there, the experience he has not only at Middle Tennessee, but at FIU. But outside of that, I could see a whole lot of guys getting some major minutes early on in the year, major snaps. And, that's exciting. I think, if you talk to Coach Mason, he probably would like the execution to be a little better than it is earlier in camp. But when you're trying to gel that many guys together that are coming from Middle, from other Division I colleges, from JUCOs, it's going to take some time. And particularly, with so many guys that weren't here in the spring in that room now. So I think, sort of that third week at camp where we get out here, we'll really know sort of where that offensive line sort of stands heading into the year.
And on the flip side of that, of the trenches, the defensive line, you got to replace so much production of those guys. You've been out here at practice all week. Andy Nwoko is a guy that me and Shane were talking about, wasn't really on our radar. We knew he had good numbers at Stony Brook, but it's an FCS level competition, so they weren't necessarily eye-popping for that level. But evidently he's catching the eye of coaches across the conference as well as media members. What are you seeing from him? And then James Stewart, we saw great things from him at the spring game. We think the edge might be okay, but there's questions about the depth and the experience that you got there at the nose tackle and defensive tackle position.
I think Nwoko's best strength right now is sort of his ability to operate in sort of Stewart's 3-4 base sort of set. Mason talks a lot about how there's 4-3 principles and sort of the 3-4 that they're bringing in, and that they're going to be using mostly 4 down linemen, sort of 4-3 setups. But Nwoko's one of those guys that's most comfortable running to opposite sides, sort of going under or over, and dropping into coverage as well, from that edge position if they're doing some sort of unusual pressure. So that's giving a little bit of a leg up. But Brandon Buckner's doing a lot of that too, and doing it at a much higher level than I expect him to be doing it, coming off of a 4-3 defense where he was basically just rushing the passer, trying to run stop every single play. So that's exciting to see. I think it's actually going to be pretty dynamic pressure-wise, what Stewart's coming up with. Some interesting looks. I've never covered a team that's really run sort of a base 3-4. And it's been interesting to see sort of that come together and sort of start to understand some of what Coach Mason's saying about how it's really not that different. It's just sort of a different way to line up. That's maybe a little more confusing for offenses to deal with sometimes. My biggest concern is outside of DeMonte Smith on the defensive line, sort of interior, can they find a second sort of like defensive tackle type to sort of run that interior? Felix Hickson's, I think, had a good spring entering into this, is impressed size wise, but they need some more depth there, and I think depth in that position is going to be the hardest to come by just because they lost so much last year. But plenty of weeks to develop it, and they've done a good job finding some JUCO guys that have a chance to sort of build up into what they want later this year.
And you firsthand have had the ability to talk to some of these new secondary guys, a lot of guys that bring in P4 experience. Brendan Harris, Ricky Smith, James Mons. Those are guys that we were just discussing with Shane a few minutes ago. Firsthand, the leadership. I know the reps, there's only so much you can actually experience with those guys, but tell me a little bit about the leadership that those guys bring. They're well-spoken individuals that I think, again, when you're talking about creating this new culture amongst almost 60 new guys, they're kind of an integral part of that, especially moving through fall camp.
Maybe my hottest take from camp is that I think the deepest room is not the running back room, but sort of the secondary as a whole between the corners and the safeties right now. Safeties are obviously going to get the highlight because you have so much returning there between Marvay Myers, Ricky Smith, as you mentioned. Chris Johnson played a little safety there last year and had some good spots, as well as some nickel. And then you add in a guy like Brendan Harris that has so much Division I experience at Vanderbilt and at Wake Forest that Coach Mason clearly trusts a lot. So the safeties are very set, and I didn't even touch on guys like John House IV and Jared Douglas, who's also done quite well in camp so far. But in quarterback's been very impressive as well. A guy we're talking to at the end of practice today, Abdul Muhammad, junior college transfer. Has really solidified himself sort of at that CB1 early on in camp, and has really impressed me in the bits that I've been out here, and sort of his ability to really control and contain some of the talented wide receivers that we have going against him on the other side of the ball. And when you have that sort of locked down, and you can have a guy like De'Ari McDonald finally start to develop into the player that everyone thought he would be, coming out of Oakland High School, and a couple of the other guys, a little bit further down the depth chart that have played a lot of snaps, it's a really talented sort of skilled defensive group that I think, will be almost the heart of the defense as sort of that front seven tries to figure some stuff out with some of the turnover they've had this year. So I have high expectations for them. I think they're going to be a group that Coach Stewart leans on pretty early, and it's a group that's shown a lot more depth than I expected them to have early on this camp.
Well, that's a hot take I'd like to hear. I don't want to challenge it because for the most part, in my experience as a Blue Raider fan, I've never been, as I was just saying, too excited about the secondary. But this is kind of the first year that maybe it's the fact that it's a fresh start that I feel really good about it. We had Scott Schaefer for so many years. The pass rush was always good, not great, which always kind of left your secondary out to dry. But I never really gave them too many excuses. So I feel good about where the secondary is and hopefully what they'll bring to the table this year. But Sam, I got a little ahead of myself in regards to the position breakdown, but I really want the fans to talk a little bit about yourself. I know you did a podcast series yourself. It's all love. Podcast love to podcast love. No, I think Sam did a great job. If you haven't had the opportunity at GoBlueRaider.com, you talked to a lot of different pieces. One of my favorite ones was Caitlin Manning, where she talks about the kind of a relatively new position. I think her position in the Stockstill administration was pieced together by a bunch of other people, whereas now it's kind of her own position. She does a great job, but she has a lot of P4 experience there. Well, that was interesting to hear about. And then you touch bases with Larry Maples. I know you had Hans on. You also had on AD of marketing, Chelsea Floyd. That was another kind of interesting one to hear those ins and outs. And, of course, your NCAA football piece was always, for a lot of us, was probably the most exciting news. But tell me about your experience kind of working behind the scenes. And you're the guy that lurks behind the scenes for the most part, and now you're bringing your voice and your face to light. So tell me a little bit about that podcast series this summer.
Well, Jake, one of the great things about you and the Blue Raider podcast coming on is that you sort of fill the niche that, our fan base as a broad whole wanted to have of someone talking about the Blue Raiders, on a weekly basis, and not only talking about, our big sports, we're talking about all the sports. So when we saw that you had sort of filled that role in sort of the media ecosystem, we thought about what can we bring from our office. And last summer we did something called the Coaches Check-In podcast series, where I sort of sat down with each head coach on staff and talked about what a summer looks like for their specific programs. And we thought about doing that again, or maybe doing something with getting an assistant from each staff. But we thought we'd be covering a lot of the same ground if we did it 2 summers in a row. So we decided to, sort of pivot and go, lean into what I knew best, which is sort of, behind the scenes of the athletic department, and talk a lot about issues that I know, people on gomiddle.com have brought up about, licensing, or, why are we selling tickets in this part of the stadium and not that part of the stadium for single games? And, just trying to answer questions I knew people had, but maybe, didn't know who to ask, or didn't know who the right person to ask was. And so we've been lucky to have on a lot of, new faces and old faces onto the Behind the Blue Raiders podcast series, which you can find on Spotify at goblueraiders.com podcasts. And we've had a really, really good success, really good feedback from a lot of people on some of those inside conversations we're bringing in. I agree with you. I think Caitlin's probably been my favorite we've done so far, mostly because she brought insight into so many of the other changes outside of the coaching staff that this football office has undergone, adding, scouting departments, increasing funding for the recruiting department, sort of football having their own social media team outside of the athletic communications office. All have sort of enhanced, the stuff that Coach Mason's bringing on the field and on the recruiting trail as well. And I thought it was important to have her sort of talk about those sort of things. And also get to know her as well, because, she's new to me as well, and getting to know her background, I think, was important. The equivalent to her, I would say, last year was a guy named Brent Brock, who the Raider fans are a former position coach, longtime friend of Rick Stockstill. I think he was official title was director of operations, sort of his last couple of years here, but he was the sort of gadget, do it all, fix the problems, help with logistics type person. And Caitlin's certainly that, but she adds, another element to it, given her relationship with Coach Mason that's gone on for a long time, and some of the other background as well. So really recommend folks check it out and get to know her, because she's an important piece to Coach Mason's puzzle right now.
Absolutely, and one of the major pieces is the recruiting, and I think Shane here's helpful with the Go Middle recruiting side of things. Recruiting is in an uptick, in my opinion. You're seeing a lot more guys, for what it's worth. Not that stars ever mean anything, but you're seeing a lot of guys that obviously have some attention from other programs, not just MTSU, which is always good. I know that something that Mason's hit heavy is recruiting the mid-state. So those are things that are really promising, or at least good to see from an MTSU Murfreesboro native perspective. But to go off of, again, your position here, I know you spent a little bit of time there in Frisco at the CUSA Media Days. The first thing I saw when the media poll came out was I messaged you and I said, who voted and what was your vote if it was you? And you instantly sent over your ballot, and I was pleasantly surprised, because it kind of validates my feelings about the conference. So you were able to be there. You got to listen to a lot of guys outside of not just MTSU. I'm sure that kind of validated some of your votes as well. What are you thinking about Conference USA and where MTSU fits into that?
Well, Conference USA, I think, has, definitive tiers right now. I think, if you didn't pick Liberty first, I would question who you picked first. I mean, I guess you could put Western or Jacksonville State there, but I think Liberty's clearly and far away the best team in the league on paper right now. And then sort of in that next year are those two teams you maybe could justify in first, which is Western and Jacksonville State. Clearly the favorites to get into that, second place spot, go to Liberty for the Conference USA title this year. And then after that, I think you have a third tier of sort of, the returning schools, that were in Conference USA, sort of last year that had a spark at different points in the year, but didn't really put it all together. So I include Middle Tennessee in that group. I include Sam Houston in that group, and FIU I would include in that group as well. And I think you could put any of them 4 through 6. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think I put us 5th in our poll there. I thought Sam Houston had just a little bit more coming back, because their offense was just so weak last year. They're going to have some sort of improvement. And their defense was really pretty good last year. And FIU sort of the reverse, where they have a lot of talented skill guys, as a lot of those Florida teams tend to have, and sort of need to find the best way to use them. And then you sort of have that last year there where you have New Mexico State team that was blown up sort of by the transfer portal with Coach Kill leaving. And then you have a La Tech team that just hasn't figured it out under Sonny Cumbie at all. Kennesaw State, new kid on the block who is struggled last year, as a lot of teams do, sort of in that weird FCS transition year where, some guys want to go, play for something, not really playing for anything, that year. But they also redshirted a lot of guys to prepare for sort of this year to have the depth that they need, the 85 scholarships that, for the time being is still the number you're allowed to have at the FBS level. And then UTEP, who's obviously rebuilding under Scotty Walden. UTEP, sort of your opinion on UTEP largely depends on how much you liked Austin Peay last year, because it's basically the Austin Peay team from last year that is in El Paso. And, there's a good argument that they could outperform sort of where they ended up expectations sort of towards the bottom of it, because they have so more cohesion maybe than a new team on the block does, maybe more cohesion than we have here in some respects for that reason. So they're definitely a team that I had the hardest time reading. I forget exactly. I think I put them 8th maybe in the final poll. Gave New Mexico State just a little bit of that edge, just because they got that sort of championship appearance pedigree to some extent on that roster. But I think any of those last 4, you could put them 7 through 10, and there's not much justification there. But so 4 clear tiers at this point in time, but there's some room to grow. Anyone in that sort of that 3rd tier can move up into that 2nd tier. Someone in that 2nd tier maybe could challenge Liberty, legitly, if Western or Jacksonville State gets a few more dudes in there that maybe we don't know about yet. Maybe they're keeping under wraps, but definitely an interesting sort of new normal in Conference USA, and something that I think will be fluid year to year, which is exciting for fans, particularly as Delaware and Missouri State get added next year.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about the tiers, and that's exactly how, whenever I put a poll together myself, that's exactly how I see it. You got Liberty at the 1, Jacksonville State, Western Kentucky at the 2, and you could maybe make the argument, you're an upset away from Western potentially being there. I still think I don't know how I feel about Western. At times, I feel like they're the number 1 team, but also they kind of have a few pieces that they've had to add along the way. So, but where Liberty's just solid. They've got their key positions. Obviously, you got Caden Salter. You return Quentin Cooley at running back. They look so good on offense that their offense is going to be their best defense. And then, of course, they got Brylan Green, one of the best safeties, not just in Conference USA and Group of 5, but one of the best safeties in all of college football. So Liberty just looks poised to repeat. And the only thing that might be holding them back from a New Year's Six Bowl is their road game at Appalachian State. But all that aside, back to the conference, I agree. When you're talking about 4, in my opinion, 4 all the way down to 8, you're one 50-50 game away from being a 4th place team or an 8th place team. And MTSU is certainly, in my opinion, in that category. You talk about New Mexico State, Louisiana Tech, Kennesaw State. I agree with you. Those are kind of the bottom tier guys, just because of where Louisiana Tech is such a question mark. I don't understand it with Sonny Cumbie. And now he's coming out on Phil Steele saying that he's going to change things up. I don't know. I'm not a coach, and he gets paid to make those decisions, but he's looking to lean a little bit heavier into the run game, and he's looking to lean a little bit heavier into a 4-3 on defense. I don't know what the plan is or how that's going to work for him.
I will say that the people from La Tech that I listen to coming out of that camp do think things are better this year than they've been the past 2 years. So that could be a team that surprises us a little bit. But obviously the track record on the 2 years from Cumbie, it's hard to have a ton of confidence in. But for what it's worth, for camp narratives, they seem to be confident they've changed something that might change their fortunes a little bit.
And back to that middle tier, FIU, Sam Houston State, I think our top 5 were the exact same. I have Sam Houston at the 4, MTSU at the 5. The reason Sam Houston's there is, like you said, the offense was lackluster through half the year, and they probably had the worst luck of any Conference USA team last season. So they've got a junior college national champion transfer quarterback, Jace Bowers. In my opinion, he's probably going to start. I know my friend Sam over at March to the Pod from Sam Houston State would probably have a differing opinion, but fall camp's still going on. So I think once they figure out a quarterback, Sam Houston is poised. But back to my original comment, you're one loss away from switching around. And unfortunately for MTSU, that's an opponent you don't get to play this year. You don't get to play Sam Houston State. And obviously, I think it's maybe for the best, although half that roster's gone. So there's probably not any bad blood between those rosters anymore. And then the other 50-50 game, FIU, the reason I think FIU is interesting on paper is Mark McIntyre. He kind of has a track record for after year 3, year 4, he gets his feet underneath himself. They seem to be improving. He's got arguably the best young quarterback in the conference in Keon Jenkins. I love him. I love his game a lot. I'm surprised he's at FIU, to be entirely honest with you. He returns his entire running back room. Linebacker unit is also very strong. He's still having to piece together an offensive line, but I think collectively his skill positions are strong. That FIU, again, if they're a 50-50 ball game away, and back to the MTSU schedule, you've got that game on the road on week 14, I believe. So you could potentially be playing for a bowl game, albeit we were predicting us to finish somewhere in that 5-7, 6-6 mark. And so if that's where you're predicting us to be at, that's a very pivotal game in down there in Miami. And to finish up there with this, to the scheduling aspect of it, I don't know how much you've looked into this, and the only reason I know this is because of Phil Steele's little help where his scheduling. We have that 3-week gap in the middle of the season where they're all midweek games.
Yeah.
We've got correct me if I'm wrong. I know it ends on Jacksonville State, which is why it's pivotal. And I think you'll be able to look it up here for me. But you got Jacksonville State in the midst of that.
There we go.
Sorry,
so we got Memphis. Memphis is the last game of September. It's our 5th game because we actually started the season in August this year. Fun fact. But that's the last Saturday game. Then we have 30 days has September, so it's 2 days in September. Plus, we got 12 days off till we play La Tech. So we get a bye week, and then I think we play them on a Thursday. Then we get a quick turnaround to play Kennesaw on a Tuesday on the 15th. Then we have a week off and play Jack State, on the next Tuesday,
a random day
on the 23rd. And then you got a huge gap off. So you're playing, UTEP in the Sun Bowl. So good news for Blue Raider fans, only 3 midweek games, only one of those games at Floyd Stadium. So we actually, we only have 1 midweek home game this year. Should help home attendance probably, if things are still going well late in the season as well. So good for us and an interesting opponent, at least for midweeks, playing Kennesaw in that game. But yeah, weird stretch of the schedule. Haven't talked to Mace a lot about it. That was a huge, talking point last year was like, how are we going to handle sort of that swing? And I think there's really not much you can do to prep for it. You sort of got to just deal with it as it comes. And the good news is that with the time off heading into that La Tech game, if you have some injuries that have accumulated there, you got a little time to sort of get healthy before the sort of midweek grind starts, and you're less worried about that going into it, because that was sort of the tough thing there. Is we played Western last year on one of those 4 or 5 day turnarounds. So we played on a Thursday night after playing on a Saturday. Tough loss Colorado State the week before. And just tough to build momentum after that. I think, you're talking about all those coin flip games. Middle played a lot of coin flip games last year. Like that season could have very easily been 7-5, 8-4 with a little bit more luck in some certain spots. And I think that's one thing to keep in mind, Bill. There's room to revert to the mean in some regards, even with, over half the roster turned over. Just with a little bit better luck and a little bit more clutch or whatever you want to, the amorphous sort of, things that matter in these sort of games, a little more attention to detail, could flip a few things. The only thing Jamie Blatnick says is that, he lost a Big 12 championship by this much, by a little inch like that. So, that's why he cares so much about the details in the weight room and alignment and other things on the field. And, you see that there. Coach Mason is getting involved in drills. He's getting his hands on guys, telling them where to be, telling them how to do things. And, exciting for me to come out here and see it, because that gives you, at least for me, a quick signal on what to watch for when he's out there as well. So exciting times. I know we went a little bit off from the schedule there, but the midweek games are going to be interesting. Obviously, the biggest stretch for us this year is going to be that first 5-game slate with, outside Tennessee Tech is sort of that, FCS rivalry game. We were just talking about sort of the rivalry trophy that is going to be back for that, which you can go. Well, I don't know if you can see in the Blue Raider Hall of Fame with all the construction going on, but it's in there right now. I'm going to go see it after practice to get a closer look at it. But after that rivalry game, obviously 4 really tough games, Ole Miss, Western, Duke, Memphis, really tough stretch. And if you come out there with even just 2 wins out of that 4, you're going to be set up well, I think, for conference play.
Yeah, I think bowl game goes back on notice if you're able to come out of that stretch with at least 2 wins. And obviously, you'd love Western to be that 1 win, and you have the benefit of it being at a home game that week. But and to relay back to that 3-game stretch there, you're playing 3 games in 14 days. And I talk about 2 of those being those coin flip games with Louisiana Tech, Kennesaw State. Jacksonville State's a tough one on the road and the only reason I say that, maybe if you're kicking off that stretch with Jacksonville State, you feel a little bit better about it, but because you're ending that 2-week stretch at a top tier team in the conference, things get a little iffy. And one thing also to note about that 3-game stretch is all 3 of those teams are coming off of their bye week. So all 3 of them have a full extra 3-4 days to prepare for that midweek game. So things can get dicey in that middle of the season. You're hoping you can stay healthy coming out of the Duke Memphis stretch. But back to where we finished in the conference, you're kind of hoping that you come out of there healthy, and if you can pick up 2 early, finish strong in that mid stretch, picking up 2 in that middle stretch, and then you got a home game with Liberty at the end of the year. Anything could really happen at that point.
Absolutely, Jake. It's you're in a position where things can grow quite a lot, and you got the ability, if you play well down the stretch, to put yourself in the conversation, which would be a great first step for Coach Mason. And even if you are learning things those first couple of weeks, you're still going to have stuff to play for, I think, late in the season with where the conference is at, where the team is at, and get this team back to a bowl game. So looks like we got Coach Blatnick coming over here to talk about. So I'm gonna tap out for him. And Jake, appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to meet Jamie, who's been a great resource for us and a great resource to me since he's come here.
Absolutely, thanks, Sam. As always, I appreciate you coming on. Welcome back into the Blue Raider podcast. I am now joined by new strength and conditioning coach Jamie Blatnick. Coach Blatnick, how you doing?
Doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm excellent. He's sporting quite the mustache, which is, I think, that's tradition, right? Strength coach has to have a mustache.
Yeah, I switched to the mustache a few years back, and it's stuck.
It seems to be a mainstay on the sidelines. But Coach Blatnick, one thing about you, I think you and Mason, in giving me a little bit about your backstory with you and Mason and your connection there, you were kind of one of his first immediate hires. What's that relationship like you have with Mason, and your role is so integral to the success of this football program?
Yeah. So yeah, me and Coach Mason, obviously we met up, we linked up at Oklahoma State when he was defensive coordinator there. We talked a lot. Built a really good relationship. Our wives have a really good relationship. And he was, I believe I was his first hire on the new staff. So he called me up. Actually, it was when I was at Oklahoma State the night before the Big 12 championship game, and just kind of asked me if I was interested. I said absolutely. I said, all right, well, you go out and handle business tomorrow. We'll talk the day after, and we did. And then it actually happened really quick. Probably within about 6 days. By 10 days, I was out here and getting started. And, we started up in January. And so my family was in Oklahoma up until May. And then they moved out in May. But Coach Mason, one thing that drew me to him is his passion for the players and the coaches. And so you don't get that a lot of places. Like, he truly cares and loves, everybody on his staff. And I could tell it's important to him, like family life, he always tells us, I don't want you up here all day. You got kids, go. But mandatory date nights with the missus. And he understands that, there's two head coaches. You have the head coach and the strength coach. So I've got them all the 9 months outside of season. So for him to push his culture and his messaging, it's got to come through me all year round. We got to set the standards, and they got to be held. And that primes them for the fall when they get here. So he definitely understands the importance of being strong, being healthy, and improving performance, outside of once we get done with the football season.
If I can draw that analogy there too, you being the first hire, like when it comes to strength and conditioning, you need to touch on it there. Not 3/4 of the year, these guys are in your hands. You're making the foundation, and obviously that was something that was so important to Mason that was the first job he took care of. And I that's something that you don't see. You might see an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, he's going to start pulling those guys immediately. But I was surprised that you were the first one, and for good reason. I think, again, you're building that foundation, and because when you come into spring camp, you're the first face that a lot of these guys are going to see. You're going to be either their best friend or their worst enemy. But nonetheless, I'm interested to hear your take. Little side piece on myself. I'm an exercise science major. I was a strength and conditioning coach. Now I do podcasts. Well, for whatever that's worth. But I'm interested to hear your take on this. When you get a lot of these new guys, I think from a strength and conditioning standpoint, one thing you're looking at with these new athletes is where are their foundations when they show up on campus. I know I've worked in high school athletes, we will drill the crap out of power clean because it's a very athletic movement. I'm interested to hear your take on that, or what are kind of those fundamentals? What are those principles you're looking for in these kids when they show up on campus?
So the first thing I do is a movement evaluation. Actually can tell a lot by just how a guy walks. Okay. And then we do, I teach them how to box squat. We go through the basics. Be surprised how many guys don't know how to properly bench press. It's wild. But you just assume they know nothing. And then you just progress them. And what I do is I start looking for weak points. So like power cleans, we don't do power cleans with our guys. Okay. I drifted away a little bit from the Olympic weightlifting. And the reason is because if you look at an Olympic weightlifter, they don't look like football players. Long torso, short arms, smaller biceps, smaller chest, right? They got to get under and catch a bar. These guys don't look like that. We recruit length. We have long arms, long legs, and it makes it difficult to try to ask their bodies to do something that's not really naturally meant to do. Sure. So we'll do a lot of sumo stance box squats, low box squats, parallel. We'll do a lot of deadlifts because they're built for that. Look at the world record deadlift holder, Hector Bjornsson. Yeah. The mountain. Yeah. What's he look like? An offensive tackle, 6'7", 360. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Well, longer limb guys are better for deadlifting. And that's the first part of the clean is the deadlift. The rest is just so technical that I got 8 weeks with them. 8-week block, 8-week block. I could spend years with guys. I mean, guys train their whole life to do Olympic weightlifting just to try to maybe make it to the Olympics. Well, the United States, I don't think we've medaled in the Olympics in 50 years. Yeah. Right? So we're not doing something right. So I just kind of looked at that and said, okay, I could have these guys for this much and I could try to teach them, these movements and they're good movements. I'm not, there's a time and place for them, but I said, I got to get the most bang for my buck in 8 weeks. So we do a lot of explosive work, like a lot of box jumps to supplement the clean, even though it's not explosive, it's a speed strength lift. But like the snatches and things of that nature, I just kind of simplify it. So everybody can jump on a box. Sure. Hey, you're going to learn that in one session. Mm-hmm. Easy. And I can get 60 or 80 jumps out of these guys in a week. I'm not getting 60 or 80 cleans or snatches out of them unless I'm wearing them out. Sure. So we'll do that. And then we actually use a conjugate method of training. So we max out twice a week, upper and lower. And then we do speed work twice a week, upper and lower. Mm-hmm. And those max effort days, one, it's a great competition day for them. So their favorite part of the summer and winter off season is the last 2 weeks when they're maxing out. Right. So they're waiting for that. And we get it every week. Now it's a different movement, maybe a board press, maybe a floor press, maybe an overhead, maybe a box squat, maybe a trap bar deadlift, maybe a straight bar deadlift. We always do some type of box jump max, seated, weighted, approach, standing, hurdle hop to a box jump, a lot of different variations of the jump. And I track all their maxes. And so while I'm doing that, I can assess my team on a weekly basis. And so I can look at them and go, our board press is not nearly where it should be. And I've got indicators for bench and squat on special exercises. And I say, if you can hit 5 or 7 of these indicators, then yeah, you're a 350-pound bencher. I don't got to put 350 pounds on your chest to know that, which keeps them safe. So I can look at the small groups. I say, okay, we need to work more triceps. And then I adjust the program accordingly, or when we got here, we needed a lot of shoulder mobility work. We need a lot of posterior chain work. So that was the main emphasis those first 7 weeks. And you bring those lagging body parts up, your big lifts go up too, because that's what's holding them back. Right. And that's going to be the first thing that goes out on them. So if you're squatting and your back goes out on you, well, your back's not strong enough. Right. So we do a lot of good mornings. We do a lot of RDLs. We do a lot of reverse hypers. We do a lot of hinge movements. I mean, these guys, we have the guys, we max out on RDLs, and we had quite a few guys hitting 500 for sets of 3. Like, okay, we got guys that did Nordics. Some of the skill guys can do 40 straight. Big skill. Some of them can do 30 straight. My O-line, D-line can do Nordics. O-line, they're getting close. I got to keep working on them a little bit. I got a couple that can, which is huge for a guy. It's 300 plus pounds. But all those little things, we just compete in them, and I just always look for the weakest point, and we hammer it until it's not. Then I find the next one, and we hammer it until it's not, and we just keep growing from there. And they can see it. They can see their maxes going up every week. Most of the time, probably say 98% of the time when we max out, everyone PRs. And for the guys that don't, it's easy for me to highlight and go, okay, what are you doing? Oh, I didn't eat. I haven't been eating. Well, yeah, I can see. So it's obvious. So then we can address that. That's kind of my approach with it. The guys that really liked it, I mean, they probably thought I was the mad scientist when we first started, because they're like, well, we're doing how many reps? I said, it's 50 reps right there. What? Soft tissue work. So we got to do soft tissue work. other than, just our strength work and our hypertrophy work. But we got to make sure tendons and ligaments and low backs, that's a lot of fascia back there. The only way that fascia gets nutrients is you got to pump the muscles around it full of blood, diffusion. So, and that's the way it gets stronger. So we do a lot of band work as finishers or warm-ups and just keep pushing the volume. Can't let the volume fall off.
Absolutely. And there's so much to break down there with all that information. And it just goes to show the type A personality a Division I strength coach has to have. And one thing really important there to kind of to backpedal just a second is you're talking about that posterior chain. And a lot of guys come in from high school. And the only reason I bring up the experience with the power clean is because that's something that people think that they have to do. Mm-hmm. And something that was so unique listening to you. I know you did a Q&A with Sam at one point in time, and just learning about your process as a true D1 strength and conditioning coach is the fact that one exercise doesn't fit everybody. And you touched on it. And I'm sure if you work with basketball players, you're working with 6, 8, 7 foot guys. You're talking about squatting. You're talking about box jumps for that matter. The body just doesn't work the same. So how do you address those things? And that's something that I think is so vital with the information you provided the fans here, is to understand that, like, they're not in there just 3 sets of 10 on the bench press today, and then we're going to max in a week or so. I think that that's such an interesting piece of the puzzle that you provide for this program. But to keep in our line of questioning here as we move forward, one thing that Sam brought up when I was out here at practice, I got here 30 minutes before you started at 7. They're doing some indie stuff. The next thing they do is they break into a stretch. And Sam made the comment that he has never been around a program that stretches more than this one does, which may be true. In my short experience, absolutely. What's the philosophy behind that?
Oh, that's funny because the guys don't think we stretch at all. Like Coach Black, we got here today. Coach Black, we don't even stretch. I said, you've been stretching your whole life. You're no more mobile. What are we doing? I said, if you want to get mobile, you got to stretch under load. Right. So a lot of the so we want to build mobility. That's done in the weight room. So we do that under load. Like if you want somebody to stretch you, what are the first thing they do? They put pressure on your back and push you down. Right? They load the muscle so it can kind of relax. So we do a lot of the mobility stuff in the weight room. Like they squat to a 12-inch box. I mean, I got off every single one of them. All right. And they can't get to 12, 13 or 14. And then we work them down. Well, that tells me you've got the hip mobility. And so for stretching, the stretch here is, it's abbreviated. It's about a 10-minute stretch warm up. So we do a dynamic warm up, then we break them into stretch lines. And that's really just to set the tempo for the practice, right? We're going to stretch them out, kind of get them feeling good. They've got individual and stuff before that. So they're already lathered up, but we're going to just kind of stretch the hamstrings, glutes, hip flexors, just kind of touch on it real quick. But really, it's more about the details, like getting them lined up. Are you buzzing to where you need to be? Are your toes on the back edge? Are your helmets in a straight line? Face mask on the back edge of the white stripe? Are we clapping it up? Right? Everything's done on a cadence. So we're all in sync, right? You get a team that's in sync, you got a good team, no matter what team it is, what sport it is. And so that's kind of the first thing to do is kind of sync them all up, right? Loosen them up a little bit, sync them up, and then send them to practice with some intensity and some enthusiasm.
Coach Blacknick's got so much information, and it's great. I think one thing that it gets overlooked all the time is the strength and conditioning position, and you talk about the soft tissue. Obviously, that's something that you address, and that's something that always gets questioned. And when I was going through my days of schooling as wanting to be a strength and conditioning coach, I did it my short time. I tried it out. It's such a nomadic job. That's one thing that kind of drew me away from it. It takes a special type of person to want to live that lifestyle. One, you have a family. That's always important to think about. But secondly, back to the soft tissue thing, as a strength and conditioning coach, the one thing that I learned was you're always going to be the last one to be thanked, and you're going to be the first one to be blamed. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate side of being the strength and conditioning coach, especially when we're talking about soft tissue injuries. So what is your approach? I know that and a lot of people don't look at it this way, and maybe you can provide me a little bit more insight as things I'm sure have changed since I was in school. Most of your soft tissue injuries come as no contact. Mm-hmm. So really that comes from a training perspective. It's not like, again, he's not getting hammered and tearing an ACL. It's because he's not decelerating properly, or he doesn't have the mechanics, or, I'm sure you can break it down a lot more eloquently than I can, but what's your piece on that?
Yeah. So there's a lot to digest there, but so you're right. You're always the first one to get blamed, last one to be thanked. And that's the first thing that happens. Well, what'd you guys do with them? Well, here's the thing is what I've learned is some coaches are like, say they're scared to train hamstrings because they don't want guys tweaking a hamstring. But if your hamstring's weak, it's going to be the first thing that goes. So if you don't have strong hamstrings or you avoid them, then you're going to have issues. Now, if you talk about non-contact injuries like ACL tears, most of them are non-contact. One thing I've done with these guys, I've implemented reflexive performance reset. So looking at an ACL. Now, sometimes it's slippage, or a lot of times they just plant. Well, what happens is these guys, what we got to make sure is that for hip extension, the firing pattern needs to go. The glutes need to fire first, hamstring second, and then your QL third. And what happens is these guys kind of get out of whack, and the hamstrings will start firing first, and then the QL, and then the glute, which is an implosion of energy, right? That energy is coming into the hips versus radiating out of the hips. So RPR, what we do is I can reset them and make sure that I can test that firing pattern, identify the muscles that are out of sync, and then reset them to keep them in sync. And that will actually prevent, it will actually mitigate a lot of studies that it mitigates a lot of soft tissue injuries. So, but it's something that I can't do with 130 guys, so I teach it to them. And then if they need it, they come and test me. I do that pre-game with them. And so we'll have guys that low backs will start to lock. When we first got here, low backs were locking up. I do an RPR session with them. I mean, they're over there stretching. They're trying to, no, that's not what you need. We need to turn that QL off, activate that glute, and turn that hamstring off. And I do a 4 minute, session with them. They'll get up and touch their toes. It's gone. I said, oh, there you go. Coming from a guy that had a lot of low back problems at playing, herniated disc, bulging, I mean, everything. That was something that I found that worked really well for me, and then the athletes I had used it on. And so I implemented it to the whole team here. And so if you look at that, so say they're that firing pattern's off, or what you hear is a lot of quad dominance, right? And so your quad can take for your hip flexion, right? You can start being a quad driver, okay? What that'll do is as your quad starts to fatigue, which is your muscle for braking, right? That slight delay in neurological firing causes that muscle not to contract, not to stabilize that knee, and that knee to slide. And then there you go. So addressing the hip flexion and the hip extension, which we do, make sure your psoases are on right. Make sure your quads aren't taking. Are you a tib driver? Have you ever seen guys run with a closed fist? They actually are driving that hip flexion with that closed fist. If you take that away from them, they'll run slower. So what you got to do is reset it, neurologically reset it, and then you have to stay on it. It's not something you do once and, oh, look, I'm fixed for forever. No, you've been doing this for a really long time. You're not going to get fixed in one day. But if you do this daily, and every time you train, you address it and make sure that everything's firing, within 10 days, it just gets easier and easier to address. And then eventually it's gone. And so that's one thing that I do with them to help with that. A lot of this, tendons and ligaments, we do a lot of high repetition band work for that. Very low weight. Hamstring curls, I do sets of 200 with a 15-pound band. Wow. Oh, yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah. So pump it full of blood. We're not tearing down any muscle, but we're going to pump it full of blood, pump it full of your blood carries all your healing factors. Mm-hmm. So the more healing factors you can get to that area, faster it's going to recover. So we'll do things of that nature that for them, I would say it seems like mindless, but you tell them 200 reps and their head explodes. What? I say, you're going to be fine. Just like the next day, hey, I feel pretty good. Yeah. There you go. Same with the shoulders. So that's how I address that side of the strength. Obviously, you got their max effort, your speed work, and then obviously keeping them healthy with the high rep, low weight bands has worked very well.
I could do this all day with Coach Blatnick. I love this stuff. I mean, it takes me back to college and my short time with strength and conditioning staffs. But absolute pleasure to meet with you, talk with you. One last question for you: have you been designated as the get back coach, as most strength and conditioning coaches are?
I definitely probably will be. If not, I'll self-designate. I like that part of it. The get back coach. So absolutely.
Well, Coach, again, I appreciate you taking the time out of practice today to come join us.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
And then after that, I think Western Kentucky's really good, but you have to see them because they went 8-5 last year. You have to see them take that next step. They do have a lot of guys back from injury that missed last year, like Michael Matheson and the cornerback, I'm forgetting his name, Stout. And then Jacksonville State has that strong run game. And then after that, like Sam was saying, it's a big tier teams with FIU, MTSU, Sam Houston State, maybe Louisiana Tech if it is really different under Sonny. But, I like MTSU's chances in that middle tier. I think they can definitely get as high as number 4. Maybe if you upset Jacksonville State, although that's a tough stretch too, you can get up to 3. But yeah, I like MTSU and I like FIU actually. I like their passing attack. It will come down. Their season will come down to if they can stop the run or not. But they have one of the bigger offensive lines in the conference, and then the passing attack with that quarterback and the receivers they added is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, to play on there on FIU and about their rush defense, and that's another one of those toss-up games. I know I mentioned the depth they have at running back, and they return a lot of that talent, but to be fair, they weren't necessarily very great at running the ball anyways. And so it's a matter of now that you're returning that ability, or returning all that experience, how do they turn that into wins? How does that translate into wins for Coach McIntyre? You feel good about him. Like you said, the passing attack with Keon Jenkins, who is going to be the next flight of top Conference USA quarterbacks, assuming he stays in Miami. The way the world works now in college football, who knows where he may end up. But yeah, I think when you look at the schedule, how it breaks down, you talk about the Western Kentucky game early in the year, and you got the Jacksonville State game that's at the end of that 14-day stretch of 3 games, and then you end the year with Liberty. I think if you want to give yourself a chance at solidifying that 6-win season to get to a bowl game, I think you feel good if you can at least sneak one of those. I think in regards to my preseason prediction, I have us dropping all 3 of those contests. But the fortunate side of things is that the Western Kentucky game's at home, the Liberty game's at home. Jacksonville State, you may just catch it at an awkward time of the season because it's a midweek game. They are coming off a bye, but we're coming off of 3 games in 14 days. There's just a lot of ifs and buts about it. But when you go back to what we have in the conference outside on those 50-50 games, where I think we're at a disadvantage, is you got Louisiana Tech on the road. Then you've got UTEP. I believe the UTEP game is, UTEP is also on the road. And then you have New Mexico State at home, and then FIU on the road. So those are, in my opinion, your 4 50-50 ball games. 3 of them are on the road. You're at a disadvantage. So another question for this team is, can they perform on the road to give themselves an opportunity to get to that 6-win mark?
Yeah, for sure. And another thing, too, with the ending on the road at the end of the year is, can this team stay healthy?
Right.
And you talked to Coach Blatnick and his new approach that he's brought into it. But like we were talking about earlier, you don't have depth at some places. And whether you stay healthy or other teams stay healthy, especially up front, because teams like, Jacksonville State doesn't really have any depth on the offensive line, but that starting unit is really good. And so stuff like that will come into play. But I think this team is good enough to win on the road, and I think they'll play disciplined enough to limit penalties, limit turnovers. It will just come down to the fact, can the team stay healthy? And can they limit those mistakes? And can they have that trench play be consistent throughout the year?
And one thing that seems to stand out through the conference has always been steady is the quarterback play. If you have good quarterback play in Conference USA, you're going to be in good hands. Talk about Caden Salter, and we talk about Nick Vadiato. I think for most people, he's going to be the second or third best quarterback in the conference behind TJ Finley at Western Kentucky. And even for him, I'm excited for TJ Finley at Western Kentucky because of the numbers he put up at Texas State. When you look at him relative to the Sun Belt, he was in the middle of the pack. But collectively, if you know college football, you know that the Sun Belt is a very pass-heavy conference. So for him to be middle of the pack of a pass-heavy conference like Sun Belt, what he's going to bring to Coach Helton there in Bowling Green is going to be tough. So we lean back on the secondary play because that's going to be the difference maker. The only team in that top tier that has a question mark at quarterback is going to be Jacksonville State. Logan Smothers, the NC State transfer there, looks promising for them. He looks like he's going to be a good threat for the conference, but in my opinion, he doesn't have the deep threat that you're going to see with Finley, Vadiato, Salter. He definitely doesn't have the the run presence that you're going to see with Vadiato or Salter. Finley's not necessarily as mobile, but the dude's got a heck of an arm. He's going to be a good threat for them. But to be fair to his run game per se, he didn't have to run very much at Texas State. They were just an air raid offense. He let it fly. So interesting. And I think with the Conference USA breakdown this year, a lot hinges really in that middle portion of the schedule. I know I've been harping on that a lot, but I feel strongly that if the season is going to go well for them, they've got to perform well in that Louisiana Tech, Kennesaw State, Jacksonville State stretch. We're going to take another short break. Practice is finally wrapping up. We got Mason talking to the team. We got our little huddle going on, so we'll probably have Mason on here any minute. So stay tuned to our live stream here for Mason as well as some of his players. off mute. Welcome back into the Blue Raider podcast. We've got our first player interview after practice. Joining me now, outside linebacker Devin Curtis. Devin, how's it going, man?
It's going good. How about you?
It's hot, but I can't complain compared to you right now. We had to make a little adjustments to our tent just to be shaded from the sun. But tell me, you're a week now through fall camp. Yeah, you're kind of one of the mainstays here on the defense. How are you gelling with these new guys? How are things going at practice?
It's been good. We've got a real good mix of new and older guys, so I've been able to kind of help gel and make the transition easier for both, just, inside and outside the locker room. So it's been good. I'm starting to gain trust and more.
When you talk about the linebacker core, you're the first name that pops up to a lot of heads, and Parker is another name that pops up. When you talk about the defense collectively, your front line kind of got depleted, and you guys decided to stay. I want to know from your perspective, what led you to stay here? And was it Mason, or was it a situation where, like, I know you've been here a long time. Was it a situation if you wanted to stay home? Was Mason a big part of that? What was that? What was that talk like?
It's kind of a mix of everything. I trust Coach Mason entirely. And like you said, like, we've got such a good linebacker core that I just really wanted to come back and play with those guys. And even some of the D linemen, like, we rotated a lot of D linemen last year. So people like DeMonte Smith, big man, Buck, Stu, like, those are guys with experience that I love playing with.
And how are you gelling with the new defensive coordinator?
It's been nice. I feel like he has trust in me, which is a big thing for me. It's just the trust that we can communicate after, practices like this and fix any sort of little kinks that, we may have.
It seems like when you go from Schaefer to Stewart, both have lots of knowledge, but Stewart has a little bit of a different philosophy relative to Schaefer. As far as that, is there any adjustment period for you, or has he kind of made that transition? And Coach Reisig might be a part of that too. Has he made that transition easier for you?
Oh, they've made the transition very easy. They've been very helpful in explaining the terms and always willing to answer questions that I may have. And then therefore I can, like, go on and help other linebackers because I've been around the game for a lot longer. So I know concepts as opposed to just schemes.
When you talk about your age, your experience on this roster, one thing that a lot of us outside opinion-wise have been curious is the depth at linebacker. You got a lot of top-end talent, and one thing that you have kind of been positioned with as being a leader on this team is, even though those aren't your teams in the future, but you played an important part in their level of development over this season, whether they redshirt, whether they get a few reps here and there. Is that a part of your game that you don't take lightly? You think that's very important in regards to the level of MTSU and Derek Mason and what comes in the future?
Absolutely, because when I was a young freshman, I had countless guys like DQ Thomas and Cody Smith. They helped me bring me along, so it's my turn to do the same.
Yeah, a lot of big names you've actually been able to work with through the years, and again, that's kind of just invaluable experience throughout. One thing that I'll draw a parallel here too, and I hate to do this to you because you got your girlfriend. She's been here at MTSU for years. Heck of a soccer player. But when I did my interview with her earlier, one thing about her was that development side of things, how that stuff's invaluable. Even though she had the opportunity, she probably could have gone somewhere else. She stuck around, and it's paying dividends for her. She's a superstar, and you're much like that here on the defense. So when I draw that parallel to you, talk about what Mason brings to the table as far as getting this football team out and about, getting your name out there. You feel that connection with the community with this new coaching staff?
Oh, absolutely. And it'll be little things like going to the Boys and Girls Club or just making an appearance at the farmers market on the weekend. Just little things, and you start gaining more and more with the community.
All these new guys, they're new to Murfreesboro. Where are you taking them to? Where's the hangout spot when you're not at practice, when you're not doing game film? Where are you taking these guys?
Well, Go USA is usually a fun spot to go to. If we're going to eat, you got to go to the Boulevard. There's just a whole bunch you can do. Now there's main event. There's just so much to do. And, with Nashville 45 minutes away, there's a place I like called Game Terminal, a whole bunch of old arcade games. Okay. So that's a pretty cool place.
Does putt ever get a little tough out there at Go USA? Is that what you guys are doing? I mean, I imagine how competitive that can get.
It can get very competitive. And, if you lose, you're going to be hearing about it for the next week or so.
I overheard at the CUSA Media Days, too, about the NCAA football. What's your experience now? You've seen yourself live in action. Are you getting better? Because I know that Nick threw out that he was watching guys play and no one was scoring. How is your NCAA football career going right now?
It's going pretty good. I mean, more hours are being logged every day. They used to be, but, with the camp grind. But I'm slowly getting better.
Absolutely. Well, that was outside linebacker, senior or graduate now, graduate outside linebacker, Devin Curtis. Devin, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Like you said, I'm coming from a new school, so you're just trying to feel your way out and just trying to gravitate to your group of guys. And in the DB room, you know, we kind of all have our similar personalities and we all have the same interests and everything. So, I mean, it's been a really smooth transition. I pretty much know a lot of the coaching staff and everything. So I'm really just here trying to help in any way I can.
And your introduction into college, you actually knew Derek Mason, right? That was your initial recruiting prospect. So, like, tell me how that changed over the years, because obviously he was out at Vanderbilt. You go to Wake Forest. He's no longer in the head coaching position. He comes to MTSU. Did you reach out to him? He reached out to you? How did that recruiting process work?
So it really came as a shock and a surprise to me. So upon graduating from Wake Forest, I was in the transfer portal, and I was just trying to kind of find out somewhere I felt comfortable and somewhere I could call home. And I saw Coach Mason get the hire. He get hired here. And I really didn't want to text him individually, so I was like, I'm going to give it a little time. And he hired Bilou, who was actually my position coach when I was a freshman at Vanderbilt. Okay. So as soon as I saw Bilou get hired, I texted him the same day, reached out to him, and he was like, hey, man, we just going to get you on a visit this weekend, you know, see if you want to be a part of here, see if you want to come here and everything. So
talking about secondary coach Bryce Lewis, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Sir.
When you talk about coaches, he's coming to MTSU from Vanderbilt as well. I'm sure they have the connection there with Mason. It's always interesting to hear the story of all the guys, because it seems to be that way, that it was just a text message, a visit later, and then boom, you're a Blue Raider. So that's always a cool story. But I want to hear your connection. Bryce Lewis, obviously you have a good rapport with him. Coach, defensive coordinator Brian Stewart, what's that connection like?
So it's really cool to be able to play for somebody who's coached at a higher level in the NFL and who's seen how it's supposed to be done and who's seen, like, you know, so being under him, I've learned so much more. And just this short period of time, you know, I'm able to see the game in a different way that I haven't before. And I'm being able to see the more of the ins and outs and everything. And it's just making me a better player and just the development of my knowledge of the football game.
Absolutely. And to lean back on it, and I asked Devin the same thing, guys that have so much experience at the Division I level, you're put in this position now where Mason, he's building a culture, and you're an integral part of that, because now you have to show a lot of these younger guys what it means to win football games, what it means to be a Division I safety or a secondary player, however that looks. And not only how does that look on a football field, how does it look in a weight room with Coach Blatnick? How does it look in a classroom? So I'm sure that's something that you don't necessarily take very lightly.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being a freshman and kind of coming in lost, not really knowing what's going on, just trying to find my way. So now I'm on the back end of it. I mean, I have pretty much a lot of experience, and I just know how to do it and what to do. So when I see the younger guys that look up to me, and they ask me a question when they want to figure out something and everything. So I just try to be that example and be that role model for those guys, because I remember I wanted somebody to look up to, and I had that.
A rolling question for all the football players that are going to be gracing the microphone today, the NCAA football. What's it like to see yourself on there, and what's your game like?
Man, it's crazy because I always thought, I was like, yeah, I probably won't see myself on there until I make it to the NFL. Then boom, they come out with the game. So it's just a blessing, and it's so much fun to be able to see yourself out there in the field, and like your friends hitting you up saying, hey man, you got a pick today and stuff. So like it's really cool to be able to see that in the game.
Where do you stack up on the roster? Are you top tier football player on NCAA 25? Are you mid tier? Where are you at in regards to your teammates here? Are you good? Who's going to win in a one-on-one tournament?
I'll probably say I'm top 5.
Okay.
There's some guys that play every day who be grinding it out. I just play casually, so but it is pretty fun.
You want to shout out who those guys are? We'll put them on notice.
Jordan Thompson, J Jack the corner, and Abdul the other corner. Those guys are pretty elite at the game.
I got you. We see where their priorities are, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, that is graduate safety Brendan Harris joining us here on the Blue Raider podcast. Brendan, I appreciate you taking the time.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you.
coming off mute. Welcome back into the Blue Raider podcast. I am now joined by another graduate safety, Marvay Myers. Marvay, how's it going, man?
Man, it's going marvelous. Nice to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Well, you're another experienced guy, much like Devin that we just had on a few minutes ago, that has been here his whole career at college. That's very unique in today's game, and there's a lot to be respected about your willingness to stick around the program. What was your decision that went into staying here when Mason was announced as the head coach?
Just it's simple. I knew Mason would come in with a good mindset on his head, a good coaching staff, and I did my research on him when I heard that he may be the next head coach. And the thing that got my attention was he was a man of faith. I'm a man of faith myself, and to see that, to know that I'm coming in with a coaching staff that knows it's bigger than ball, but also pushed me to be a better man, a better player, and even a better father. So just to see how they handled themselves in the whole process and how they came in. I had time to hit the portal if I wanted to, but to be around these guys and to see their mindsets and the experience that they have on the coaching level, I made the right decision to stay here and learn from them.
Absolutely. I love to hear that, especially when you're talking about the character things outside of football that are so much more important. Mm-hmm. And I'll echo the same question I had for Brendan as a guy that has this now responsibility of creating a culture. You've met Mason now. You understand what he expects out of you. Talk about what that position is like for you in regards to developing these younger guys, understanding what it takes to win football games, not only on the field, but off the field.
So our goal as a team is to win a conference championship with character, integrity, and academic excellence. So to be here and to be in a role to give back to the youth and, build these guys up. I've been here before. I played behind Javante Moffitt, Reed Blankenship, DQ Thomas, and to see how those guys handled themselves and what they did and the extra they put in to get to where they are. I took some notes, and now I just try to be the best example for those guys by being good off the field, handling things right, being on time, being early, doing the extra mile. I really appreciate it, and I really take that mental seriously to be a leader and to try to build up people because, that's what we need. They're the foundation of this team. Me and Brendan and Devin, we're going to be pretty gone soon. So it's going to be on those guys to keep the MT culture alive and to follow behind Mason. So it's just really living what Mason is preaching and letting those guys know they can do the same thing.
Yeah, that is a cool piece of what you've been a part of when you come to MTSU. Talk about guys that have had their crack at college. Moffitt was a guy who was probably, in my opinion, a shoo-in at the NFL, and so he had some shoulder issues later on in his career. But Blankenship, everyone knows what he's doing right now in Philly. So that is a really cool parallel that you're drawing there with a lot of those guys. Mm-hmm. But I want to get back to what you're seeing on the field here with a new defensive coordinator, Coach Stewart. You got a new secondary coach in Bryce Lewis. I know that Harris has a little bit of a history with him. How are you clicking with those guys?
Man, I'm clicking pretty well, just adjusting to their coaching styles. Coach Bryce Lewis, he's pretty energetic. Coach Stu is, he's very serious and detail-oriented, so he wants you to be focused out there. But I'm really enjoying soaking in the knowledge they have from the Power 5 level, from the NFL level, and to just get the coaching points that, he gave to some great pros, to be able to put that in my arsenal and be able to go out there and play. He's making me see the game from a whole different perspective, and I appreciate that.
And talk to about the battles that are going on. Mason said at first day of fall camp that he's never had a program that's been deeper with more battles throughout, and you're kind of a part of that with the secondary. Sam Dalton, staff writer here at MTSU, said that his hot take was that the running back room is deep, but he thinks the secondary room is deeper. And again, you're here in your last year. It's like one of those situations where competition breeds excellence, and you're going to be a product of that. So tell me about those battles you're going against with these guys. What's that like? And I guess draw the parallel there. You feel good that you have to battle every day at practice. It's going to make you a better ball player.
Right. So coming out and competing with these guys every day just makes you want to have that edge each and every day. It's making me go the extra mile off the field, putting in my extra work, being detail-oriented. And that's what we need as a team because I know if I'm a step behind, the guy next to me is going to be a step forward. So that's pushing each and every one of us in all positions to stay ready, to be ready and compete. And it's making us make a lot of plays on the field versus the offense. And like you spoke on, the running back room, they're pretty deep too. Linebacker room is deep. D-line is deep. I feel like our whole team is deep. And it's a lot of guys who are hungry to go out there and make a name for themselves. And that's what we need to be a good defense and a great team.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up here, Marve, you said this before we came on. We're going to address EA Sports right now. I know that an executive from EA is listening to this interview right now. You've got a little beef with the ratings you got there in NCAA football. Let's go ahead and let's put that on the table. Address what issues you got.
I'm blessed to be a part of the game, but there's one thing I noticed about my character, EA, and I just want this to be adjusted. I don't care if it's after a few games, but I have the slowest speed in the secondary on our team, and I feel like that should be bumped up. You know, I deserve at least an 87 speed. Made a lot of good plays running, showing my versatility on the field. But if I have to prove that again, I just want a special eye to watch me throughout this year so we can boost that speed up, because a lot of people text me telling me they get beat over top with my dude.
having a tough time in cover 2 with Marve Myers. Well, I'm excited about what you got this year. Obviously, like you said, maybe we'll get a couple games under your belt. You'll feel a lot better about that rating. But Marve, I appreciate you taking the time to stop by the Blue Raider podcast, and the best of luck to you this season.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
And welcome back into the Blue Raider podcast. Sorry for that long halt there. We're waiting on Omari. He's quite the hot commodity out here at Media Day. Junior wideout, Omari Kelly. I have you pinpointed as an absolute superstar for this year. No pressure. But Omari, welcome to the show. And one thing I wanted to bring up about you when I talk about the superstardom in you, and I met you at the spring game during the media availability, and the one thing I brought up was the chip on your shoulder.
Yeah.
You're coming from Auburn. You maybe didn't see the minutes that you wanted there, but you had some playing time there. You're coming to MTSU to kind of make a name for yourself. You fit the Mason archetype, if you will, about a guy that's willing to work hard every day and make a name for himself. Tell me a little bit about the grind for you here at MTSU.
Well, first, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And I feel like the grind is what it is, really. I feel like everybody has to put in their own type of work to get what they want out of this game. So I feel like the work I put in is going to put me where I need to be and get me everything I want.
And one thing we noticed today is that Coach Reeder is not shy to give you the ball. And I know you're rolling through ones, and they'll put different cornerbacks on you every snap or so, but they're not shy about getting you the ball. That seems to be an integral part. Is that a discussion you've had a lot with Mason and Reeder about your utility and how much you're going to be used on the offense?
No, not really. We normally, whenever we're talking, we're just talking about different concepts with different players we're going to run.
And so, but you get a lot of those reps out there at CB or with other CBs. I want to know your take. Who's your favorite to go up against?
Who
makes you better?
Who makes me? All of them make me better, but I'd say the most fun to go against are probably Abdul and Trey Farrell.
Okay, why specifically? Why so? I mean, are they more physical with you? They make it hard. Are they good with after catch, getting that ball, knocking that ball? What about their game makes it more fun to go up against in practice?
I feel like with Abdul, he has really good technique and he's physical at the point of the catch. And Trey is just physical throughout the whole route, and I feel like that's gonna help us when we go against bigger DBs and stronger DBs.
And you definitely bring a different perspective here to MTSU because you're going into Conference USA. There are a good share of top-end talent. We talk about like Brylan Green over at Liberty. Jacksonville State has got themselves a guy that's on an All-American watch list. So there's a lot of guys out there that is definitely be tough, but you bring some SEC experience, and you know the level of talent that's in the SEC. It's littered all throughout. What are kind of some experiences that you're drawing from Auburn that you're going to carry over here to MTSU that are kind of make you a better ball player?
Just experiences like in terms of sharing the knowledge that I have in terms of like coverages and getting open and things like that, because I've been under good coaches, legendary coaches like Ike Hilliard. He was my coach at Auburn my freshman year, and he taught me a lot, and things like that just helped me out, and I'm just glad I'm in a position where I can help them out at the same time.
Perfect timing here as Nick's approaching the 10 here. I want to know what your connection with him is like. He's a mainstay here in Murfreesboro. Everyone knows and loves him. You're kind of a new name to people in Murfreesboro. What's your connection been like with Nick, and how has he done as far as introducing you to Murfreesboro?
That's my guy, man. Me and Nick, we hang out outside of football, so I feel like that's doing nothing but helping us get a better relationship and get better chemistry. And Nick's just a good guy, man, all around.
Absolutely. And the development off the field is going to pay dividends for you. Any other wide receivers that you kind of, I know I pinpointed you as the wide receiver one. Any other guys that you see in your room that have impressed you early on in fall camp that we should keep an eye on?
Miles Butler, Cameron Lacey, Kellen Stewart, Sam Driggers too. You can't sleep on Drigg. Okay. Drigg got hands like magnets. So
I was really impressed. I love that you mentioned Cameron Lacey. The word I describe on him is slippery. Like the dude always seems to find a hole. So I'm excited. It's interesting to hear you say that. But Omari, I appreciate you stopping by our booth today, having a few words with us. I'm excited about your upcoming season, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
And welcome back into the Blue Raider podcast. I am with another familiar face on the MTSU Blue Raider roster, quarterback. Are you at junior eligibility now? It feels like you've been here for a minute, and COVID throws a wrench in that. Where are you at as far as eligibility goes?
So I didn't get COVID. I graduated high school in 2021. So I'm going on my fourth. This will be my fourth season playing.
Okay.
And I have this year and then one more year to play.
One more year. Okay.
Yes,
I say you've been here for a minute, and because your first season here was, God, a whirlwind of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You got the MVP in the bowl game there.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, your career's just kind of been all over the place, and you've become a mainstay. I bring up the MVP bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you draw from that experience that has carried you at such a young age of a Division I quarterback to now where you're kind of a coveted top 3 guy, top 2 guy in CUSA? You're talked about across the country. So where do you draw from that experience as far as your growth as a D1 quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It feels like a lifetime ago. I mean, it honestly, that thing could have been 30 years ago, and I would have been like, if you told me it was 30 years ago, I would probably been like, you're right. But I mean, I think I've learned a lot since that true freshman season. I mean, just like you said, it was kind of like a whirlwind of things going on. Kind of quarterbacks here, quarterbacks leaving, quarterbacks in, quarterbacks getting hurt. But kind of towards the end of the season, I just had to go in and I had a role. And we found a way that season to just kind of become bowl eligible. We got to play a really, really good Toledo team. That defense was stacked, and I think they got some guys in the NFL now. We were able to, just bear down and pull out a win. And I think I learned a lot from my true freshman season. I mean, obviously, like my first start versus Western, at Western, I threw 5 interceptions. Probably not your ideal first start in college football. But I mean, listen, all you can do is, control what you can control. Gotta, whatever happens, good or bad, you got to move on to the next thing, whether it's the next play, the next game. And I think taking that mentality from my freshman year and just applying it to my sophomore and like even my junior season last year, it's just like, good or bad, next play, move on, clear-headed. I think if you have a clear mind, you can play, you can play clear and play confident too. And I think that's really important.
Forged by fire is, I think, the saying that goes about your freshman season there. Like, you literally just got thrown into the fire. You had to figure it out. It's paying dividends for you now later on in your career. One thing that I think I was stunned by was Stock still leaves, but you stayed. Mm-hmm. You didn't immediately enter the portal. I want to know from your perspective what went into the decision to stay. Was it kind of like you were wait and see? Who do we hire?
Yeah.
Were you in talks? How did that whole thing go down?
Yeah, I didn't want to just, jump the gun, make like an emotional decision and enter the portal. I mean, the portal's it's a crazy place, no telling what can happen. I think just talking to my parents too, talking to, I mean, full honesty, like just getting advice from Brent Stockstill, like, kind of about, he played the position, he's a very smart man, just wanted to get his advice on things. And, he was very adamant about like, just, listen, like wait and see who they hire, maybe it's a good fit. And I think, when they hired Coach Mason, the first day, the night he was hired, he came and he spoke to the team. And I think from that moment, we just started to build a really good relationship. I think his vision, we shared the same goals. We shared the same vision about where we want this team to be and where we want to go. And, ever since then, we've continued to build our relationship. And, I have full trust in him. And I think that's why I stayed. And, we have a good group of guys, whether it's guys who were here last year returning or new guys, we have a really, really good group, a really talented group, a smart group, a group that plays with confidence. And I think, you never know what's going to happen. Table's wide open. And I think, we have a really, really good opportunity to do a lot of good things this season.
I think that's interesting you bring up the point there on Brent. You've worked with a lot of quarterbacks, but Brent was kind of a weird cog to the whole thing, if you will, because of his relationship, obviously, with his father, but where he is with the university. I think it's quite the character of him to say something like that in your best interest. Because it's very easy to make an emotional decision when that happens, especially if you're listening to Brent as some sort of mentor to yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, Brent is a phenomenal human being. He's a role model. He's someone I looked up to, him, Coach Stock. And I think, like I always say, like a big reason I feel like what got me to MTSU was kind of the kind of person Coach Stock is. And I think what helped me stay is the kind of person Coach Mason is. You take the football away and he's a really good human being, a really good person. He has standards, he has morals, and I could get behind someone like that. I respect him. I look up to Coach Mason. He leads our team. And that's something like I saw that in Coach Stock and Brent, and I look up to them and they're my role models. And I think now, like, I can see that in Coach Mason leading this team as well. And I have full confidence in his vision, his goals, what he has us doing. And I mean, he's leading this ship and we're right behind him. So I'm excited.
A little behind the scenes. I think Mason's behind the camera.
I see him.
I don't know if that has anything to do with
hydrated.
That has anything to do with that.
He's hot. There. Look at him. He's wearing pants out here.
He's crazy. But draw back to your roster here, the wide receiver makeup. It's kind of a whole new room other than Willis is kind of a mainstay you had last year. How are you meshing with those guys?
It's been phenomenal. I think the good thing is a lot of new receivers were here in the spring. So, I mean, we started working on that chemistry early. And then Miles, Hayes, they kind of got here in the summer. So I think just getting to grips with them, like, it's been really good. And I think Amari leads that room. Holden, who's really a tight end in the tight end room, but I mean, Holden, you could put him anywhere and he'll freaking ball out. So I think Holden and Amari kind of just leading like those outside guys, like getting them going. And then Gamarion, Hayes, Miles, Kellen, Cam, like everyone's kind of like, it's not like one guy's standing out. Like everyone's making plays. The ball's spreading around. I think, like I said, Amari's doing a great job just being a leader in that room, kind of getting guys to follow him. And, like that's my guy. Like those are all my guys. And I mean, I'm excited to see what we do this year.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have QB Vadiato joining us, the only man that could hold up Derek Mason from an interview. But Nick, I appreciate you stepping in and joining the show.
Thank you so much.
All right, and we are back on the Blue Raider podcast. The man that we've all been waiting for. I've been out here since 7, Coach. I'm dying, but just all for this man right here. I'm excited to have you back on the podcast, this time in person. Coach, your weekend to fall camp, how you feeling?
It's been spectacular. I think anytime, we're on the grass today, right? Our grass feels good. It's a change up from the turf. Our stadium right now is full of players with a lot of energy, trying to get better in a space where, that's the only option, right? That's what camp is. Camp is about getting better. It's about making sure that we put our best foot forward. And these guys are sort of attacked days. I think you felt the energy when you came out here today. I think you saw a football team in that's got 59 new faces, but a lot of times that much newness can leave some stagnation or this idea that we're sort of deer in the headlights. We're not in that space right now. I think this group is sort of player-led by guys like Nick and Devin and BH and really Julius Pierce and other guys like that. And our coaching staff is doing a great job just feeding them, right? We just got to play. Football's got to be played, right? You can give all the soliloquies and all these presentations, but this game is about getting better between the white lines, and that's what we're trying to do.
Coach, I want to draw back to last week when you had your first media availability after your first day of fall camp, and something that just kind of struck a chord with me was you got asked a question by Cecil Joyce, the DNJ, about you not taking these days for granted. A year ago, you weren't here, and now you're back out here. You got a little emotional, but I think that there's a part of that I think as a Blue Raider fan, you can really hang your hat on that, is the fact that, like, all of this matters to not only you, but to all these kids. Because if they can all personify that same emotion that you have, and just the question of, hey, this is important to me, I think there's a lot to take away from that. And that speaks volumes for what you're breathing into these kids' lives.
Yeah, the reason why, I sort of got emotional, when I came back to this, right, I sort of made a decision. And, like, I didn't consult my daughters. I didn't consult my wife, like, in the right way. Right. I was just excited about the opportunity. But, sometimes, you can be scarred by the process of what happens in this. and like your family wants to see you do well. They think this is a great opportunity. I believe it's the best scenario possible, right? Not far from, where I had been. And like at a place like this is not a rebuild. This isn't like some 3 or 4 year rebuild. This we have an opportunity now, like to go get it. And then I'm excited but emotional when it comes to it because you don't know when the second chance is ever going to come. Mm-hmm. And it came at the right time, the right place with the right people. And I'm thankful. So when you saw the emotions are about like joy, right? I think, the greatest emotion sometimes is joy, and joy brings about a myriad of things in you. That day, man, it just made me reflect as I look. Don't take this for granted. Yeah. This is a special place, so make sure that you maximize your opportunity. And I feel like there's not a day I walk into the building that I'm not looking to get better along with the players and coaching staff, man, that I'm taking the journey with.
It's too early in the interview, Coach, but you got me feeling like I already want to run through a brick wall. And that's what I tell everybody. The second after I talk to you, you make me feel like I want to run through a brick wall. But talk about the staff now. You mentioned the 59 new players. You overhauled the entire staff, and we spoke about this last week, just in person. Pulled you aside at the family fun thing last week.
Yeah.
Some people might look at that and say that's a disadvantage to the MTSU program. And you just said it right there. This isn't a rebuild. Even though you got all these new pieces, by definition, you're rebuilding, but you don't feel that way. You feel that this is an opportunity for you, that you got new pieces, but you're able to implement a new culture with all those people. You're starting from scratch per se, but you've got the pieces you want, and you feel good about what's to come.
Well, I think, again, you really feel like you're starting from scratch when you don't have a quarterback. Okay, and Nick Vadiato is as experienced, as nuanced a quarterback coming back as there is in this conference, right? So you look there and you say, okay, how do we build around him? So you try to give him an offensive line that's bigger, a little longer, a little more athletic, and let's go with this group. You try to bolster the skill rooms. You implement the ability to play with tight ends, to sort of secure edges and open up the middle of the field a little bit. And you get dynamic, man, outside with skill that can run. So I think that complementary defense, we lost some really good pieces, but have sort of played into this space that if we can put really good players, athletic players in position, and I think that's the key, right? Not making them conform, but playing to their strengths. Right. A lot of people want to say, okay, well, it's this scheme, and this scheme's going to be. Now, we looked at our players and we said, this is what fits our players. This is what their strengths are, skill set wise. Let's stay there, right? And I think that's the learning lesson for me. My second time through in this, that's going to pay dividends for this football team, and it's going to allow us to go further faster. Okay, and I think sometimes you can get stuck trying to be methodical. Hey, man, I'm trying to scratch where it itches. Right. Okay, and that's a good place to be because it's competitive. Today, man, you watched the end of practice. It was extremely competitive, and the energy was high. Well, that only comes when guys know. I mean, it was 11-11. Okay, how balanced is that? Right. I mean, I couldn't have scripted it any better. For a team period at the end of practice, it's 11, to 11, and there's one play to decide it all. Right. So, and you saw the energy. Guys are jumping, hollering, chanting, and somebody had to win, somebody had to lose. Fortunately, offense won, defense lost, and the push-ups. Guys will do something crazy for a T-shirt and push-ups. It's sort of crazy, but that's the love of the game.
Absolutely, and I love how you talk about you're not strong arming the philosophy there. You're gonna take with what the personnel gives you. And one guy I wasn't able to speak to, at least not yet, anyways, is defensive coordinator Brian Stewart. But you're a defensive guy, and he's kind of a guy that personifies that of not strong arming the philosophy. He's working with what he's got. You're having to rebuild a defensive line that got obliterated in the portal, but you feel good about the pieces you added. And then the secondary is, as Sam Doughton had said to me, he feels like that's probably one of the deeper rooms across the roster is that secondary. So how do you feel about the defense?
I think you build a defense front to back, right? if you look in the D line room, there were some guys here with Buckner, Stu, DeMonte, a young Bynum, Shakai Woods. These guys were guys who had waited their turn, right? But then you add Andy Nwoku, you 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 mint a newly signed Alex Williams, transfer from Vandy, that I think's gonna help solidify what that front is. You bring in some guys, with Gillespie sitting inside, and we got another big guy. I can't remember.
They're so deep.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember all names, but I mean we're just deep. So I think the idea that we've solidified our depth matters.
Yeah.
Like for us, and then the backers are going to be what they are, right? I mean, a little more experience. We got some young and old. We don't have the mid groups in there. I like where they sit, but secondary wise, everybody was wondering what we were going to do with the secondary. I think portal football and COVID, gave us some gifts. The Ricky Smiths of the world. Man, you look at Brendan Harris. He's a COVID gift. When you look at like where we sit with Jalen Jackson, that's a COVID gift. Like these are guys, man, who have a lot of experience. But then you bring in the Muhammads, you bring in the Jonathan Houses of the world, man. You start to look at, what's in your program, with Farrell and, some of these other guys inside. Man, we went to Indiana, man, and got Mons. And I think these guys have made our DB room look different. We're long. We're explosive. And that's to add to like Marvay and CJ and some of the other guys that were already here. So that makes you deeper in special teams, right? So it changes the landscape of the way we can play football. And I think that's what Stu was excited about. He was excited to see front depth and like back end, guys that can take the ball out of the air. And a guy that I forgot to mention, but I think has probably had best fall camp is Diari McDonald.
Really?
That dude's played phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're in good headspace right now.
Yeah, local guy. Again, Diari McDonald, Oakland product, for those that don't know.
Repping it.
Yeah, he's outside linebacker, nickel back, but now he's moving out to the corner. He's your star corner now.
He's corner. And he's talented. He's a pure corner. Like in my mind. He's big enough to play nickel. We've seen him off the slot. He can give you some Rod Woodson type of flex, because that dude can guard inside, but he's something special outside. He's long, he's strong. He showed a propensity to take the ball out of the air. Diari was a great offensive weapon coming out of high school. So when you look at the ball skill, I mean, it's pure.
Quite the parallel with Rod Woodson, throwing it back there, Hall of Famer. But Coach, yeah. I'm getting the light that it's time for you to head on over to another episode. But Coach, I appreciate you coming on again. Seeing you all around Murfreesboro, but it's good to finally see you in person.
My God,
see you in person today. But
you too.
God bless you, Coach, and I appreciate you coming on.
You too. Go Blue.
Go Blue. Welcome back into the Blue Raider podcast. Finally wrapping up. It's been 3.5 hours of recording here at practice. For those that may be joining on late, I've got Shane Pickering here, partner with me over at Go Middle. You were able to sit in on all those interviews. A lot of good stuff. Like I was saying there with Coach Mason, man, when I talk to him, it makes me just want to run through a brick wall. If the team even has half the confidence that he has, I think we're in really good hands.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think he's brought a new level of confidence and toughness to mentally to this team, and I think you're going to see that play out this year, especially as the season goes on into that lighter stretch of the season.
Absolutely, and I wish I could have gotten the opportunity to talk to him about that stretch that I've been talking about, harping on, is that mid-game stretch, see how all that plays out. There's so many things picking up this season, like I talked with Coach Reeder about the new headsets that the quarterback can wear, as well as a member of the defense can wear. There's going to be so many new things, but it's an exciting season nonetheless about what Mason's building here. On and off the field. If you've seen his stuff throughout Murfreesboro, if you haven't bought your season tickets, you need to do so. One thing exciting about the Blue Raider podcast, we will be doing a giveaway on the first game for August 31st against Tennessee Tech. So keep your eyes peeled for social media. If you're not already following us, we're on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Blue Raider Pod. If you're listening to our live stream over at YouTube, please subscribe. You're helping the channel out as we continue to grow. And I'm excited about what the podcast is going to turn into this fall as we go my first full academic year and my first actual football season covering. And Shane, hopefully he'll be a part of that. I know he will be over at Go Middle, but Shane, signing off for last little bit. I want to hear, what your thoughts are on the season, a little prediction for the folks. What's that record you got for them?
Record wise, I don't know, but I think they make a bowl game. That's my prediction this year. I think the line of scrimmage will determine whether that's 6-6 or 7-5. I was talking with some people just a minute ago, and Liberty coming in late, that could be an interesting game. So maybe even 8-4 if things fall the right way. But that's with everything going absolutely right. But I think a bowl game would be a good start. And I think you come out to a practice like this, you see everyone's bigger physically, they're faster, they're quicker, and it's exciting times for Middle Tennessee football.
Absolutely. I'm excited. Like I said, practice went well. I'm excited for MTSU having us out today to talk with all the coaches. I look forward to returning back to our weekly schedule in 2 weeks, so keep eyes peeled for that. We'll start breaking down, again, the football. I know I'll have Austin Lewis on, as well as previewing some of our fall sports, along with volleyball and soccer coaches on that week as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that announcement coming in 2 weeks. And until next time, go Blue.